The Caribbean sun beat down on the water. The honeymooning couple floated side by side, their masks fogging as they scanned the coral below. She pointed at a school of bright yellow fish as they swam by. He nodded, giving her a thumbs up before motioning for her to follow him. The water seemed brighter as he gestured toward a cluster of coral ahead. She kicked toward him, the camera dangling on her wrist, capturing the colors and shapes of the reef. Then, he stopped. Then his body stiffened. His legs kicked erratically to keep him upright. His hands flew to his head, clawing at something invisible. His eyes widened in panic. She swam closer, but as she reached him, her breath caught. She froze. There were 3 of them, small, metallic spheres. 2 latched onto his temples. 1 sat squarely over his chest, just below the collarbone. They pulsed faintly, reflecting sunlight in a way that didn't feel natural. He thrashed harder, bubbles erupting from his snorkel as his breathing turned ragged. The spheres pulsed faster, their glow brightening with each spasm. His movement slowed, jerking unnaturally, his body convulsing in sharp, erratic motions.
"Come on, kick,"
she yelled, her voice muffled by the snorkel. She grabbed his arm and turned to the surface. He twitched, his muscles stiff and uncooperative, but he managed to follow her. The camera caught glimpses of the spheres as she dragged him. Their surfaces were shimmering, almost rippling, as if they were alive. By the time they reached the boat, his body had gone limp. The crew scrambled to pull him aboard, their faces pale as they saw the spheres clinging to him. She hauled herself onto the deck, her breaths coming in gasps as she threw off her mask and snorkel. The spheres had stopped pulsing. They lay still now, cold and unyielding, but they didn't let go. "Help him!" she cried. Her hands shook as she fumbled with her camera, her eyes darting between her husband and the strange metallic objects. "Do something!" He stirred, coughing weakly. "I'm fine," he murmured, his voice faint, but the way his hand trembled as he reached for her said otherwise. She didn't believe him. The sun continued to shine, the water below calm and glittering, as if nothing had happened. They returned home 3 days later. The familiarity of their suburban life felt foreign now, the hum of the air conditioning and the clatter of unpacking filling the silence. He went back to work, insisting that routine would help him feel normal again. She wasn't so sure. At first, things seemed fine. He moved slower than usual, but blamed it on jet lag. Over dinner, he joked about their next trip, his voice light despite the shadows under his eyes. But she noticed the small things, the way he flinched when he leaned against the counter, the way he rubbed his temples when he thought she wasn't looking. "It's probably just leftover tension," he said one evening, brushing off her concern. "That dive rattled me more than I thought." She forced a smile, but said nothing. The spheres hadn't budged, their presence a constant, silent reminder that something wasn't right. Days turned into weeks. He complained of headaches that came and went, a dull throb behind his eyes. He started skipping meals, his appetite waning. One morning, she found him standing in the bathroom, staring at his reflection. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "Nothing," he said, quickly turning away. But she caught a glimpse of his chest in the mirror, where the sphere's edges seemed to have sunk deeper into his skin. The flesh around it was swollen, tinged with a faint, unhealthy gray. "Please," she whispered, "let's get this checked." He shook his head, his jaw tight. "I'm fine," he snapped. "Just drop it." The sharpness in his tone silenced her. He had never spoken to her like that before. That night, she woke to the sound of him groaning in his sleep. His body twitched under the covers, his face slick with sweat. She reached out to shake him awake, her hand brushing against his chest. The sphere was warm. Too warm. He bolted upright, gasping for air, his eyes wild. "I'm fine," he panted, pushing her hand away. "Just a bad dream." But his voice wavered, and she could see the fear he tried to hide. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of water, her hands trembling. The camera still sat on the counter, untouched since their return. She picked it up, scrolling through the footage once more. The spheres seemed to pulse in the video, their rhythmic glow hypnotic and unnerving. She stared at the screen, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. Upstairs, his breathing turned ragged again, a sound that didn't belong in the quiet of their home. Something was wrong, and it was only getting worse. The bathroom was filled with steam, the faint scent of lavender drifting through the house. He had drawn a bath, mumbling something about wanting to relax his aching muscles. She had nodded absent-mindedly, her focus on tidying the kitchen. The sound of running water was comforting, almost normal, in the tense silence that had filled their home over the past week. He lowered himself into the tub, the warm water lapping at his skin. For a moment, the tension in his body seemed to ease. He let out a sigh, leaning back against the porcelain. His hands rested on the edges of the tub, fingers slack, his eyes drifting shut. Then, the pain struck. It started in his chest, a searing, unbearable heat radiating outward. He gasped, clutching at the sphere embedded above his sternum. The metallic surface burned under his fingertips, its edges pulsing faintly. His head snapped back, eyes wide as the agony spread to his temples. "No!" he choked out, his voice strangled and broken. His hands clawed at the spheres, but they didn't budge. Instead, they pulsed faster, their glow intensifying. The first one burst. He screamed, the sound raw and primal, echoing off the tiled walls. The sphere on his chest ruptured with a wet, sickening pop, sending a ripple through the water. There was no visible wound, no blood, but the pain was worse than anything he had ever felt. His vision blurred, the edges darkening as the second sphere erupted, its shards dissolving into nothingness. Downstairs, she froze as his scream shattered the quiet. "Are you okay?" she shouted, already running toward the stairs. Panic rose in her chest as she took the steps 2 at a time. The bathroom door was ajar, steam spilling into the hallway. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle. "Honey?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Pushing the door open, she stopped cold. He was slumped in the tub, his head tilted back at an unnatural angle. The water was dark and murky, swirling with an oily sheen that clung to the porcelain. His face was frozen in an expression of pure terror, his eyes wide and unseeing. The spheres were gone. In their place, faint indentations marred his skin, as if something had burrowed deep and left nothing behind. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She stumbled forward, her hands gripping the edges of the tub. "Wake up! Please wake up!" She shook him, her fingers digging into his shoulders. His body was limp, unresponsive. The water sloshed around him, the oily residue clinging to her skin. A low, faint ripple spread across the surface, moving with a purpose she couldn't comprehend. Her breath hitched. The ripple moved again, this time against the current, as if alive. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her ears. She rushed downstairs, straight to the camera, still sitting on the counter from earlier. She grabbed it, fumbling with the lens, desperate to document what she knew no one would believe. But when she got to the bathroom, the water was still. The ripple was gone, leaving only the faint hum of the house and the weight of silence pressing down on her. She dropped the camera, her legs buckling beneath her as the reality sank in. He was gone. The water in the tub shimmered faintly, the oily residue swirling one last time before settling. The fluorescent lights in the morgue buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the cold steel table where his body lay. A sheet covered him, hiding the look of terror that had been frozen on his face since she had found him. The medical examiner stood over him, their gloved hands hovering, hesitant. They had seen all kinds of death, gruesome, tragic, inexplicable. But this one was different. There were no visible injuries, no marks, no explanation. Just the eerie stillness of a body that looked untouched by violence, but felt undeniably wrong. A second examiner joined them, clipboard in hand. "What are we calling it?" they asked, their tone uneasy. The first shook their head. "I don't know. There's nothing. No trauma, no internal bleeding. It's like he just..." They stopped, searching for the right words. Stopped. She sat in the waiting area, her fingers gripping the strap of her bag so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were hollow, red-rimmed from days of crying. The camera rested in her lap, its memory card holding the footage she had replayed too many times to count. Each viewing burned the same questions into her mind. What were those spheres? Why had they chosen him? And what had they done to him? When the medical examiner emerged, she stood quickly, hope and dread warring in her expression. "Did you find anything?" she asked, her voice cracking. The examiner hesitated, then solemnly shook their head.
You have to keep looking. It was those things,
she said, her voice rising. She lifted the camera, clutching it as if it were a lifeline.
The spheres. I have them on video. You have to see it.
In a small, dimly lit office, the footage played on a monitor. She sat beside a detective, the medical examiner standing stiffly behind them. The room was cramped. The only sounds were from the faint hum of the computer and the clicks of the mouse as the video rewound. On the screen, the underwater world flickered to life. Coral reefs glowed, fish darted, and then there he was, thrashing in the water. She fast-forwarded to the moment she could barely bring herself to watch.
There,
she said, her voice tight.
Right there.
The screen froze on his contorted body. The metallic spheres clung to him, pulsing faintly in the filtered sunlight. The detective leaned closer, squinting. The medical examiner's eyes widened.
What the hell are those?
The detective muttered, his tone shifting from skeptical to alarmed. She hit play, and the spheres moved, subtle ripples across their surfaces as if they were alive. When the video ended, no one spoke.
They were on him when we got back to the boat,
she said finally, her voice trembling.
They never came off, and then they just disappeared.
The detective leaned back, his expression unreadable. More silence filled the room. Days passed. The footage was analyzed, questioned, and ultimately dismissed by authorities. They called it a freak accident, some kind of undetected marine toxin. The spheres, they said, were likely an optical illusion caused by light refracting underwater. She argued, pleaded, showed them the footage again and again, but it didn't matter. They didn't want to listen.
You don't believe me,
she whispered during her final meeting with the detective. Her voice was flat, her hope gone. The footage made its way to the Foundation quietly, passed along through whispers and unofficial channels. Someone somewhere had flagged it, marked it as impossible to explain and too dangerous to ignore. In a sterile, windowless room deep within a secure facility, the footage played again. The screen illuminated the faces of two agents seated side by side. Their expressions remained neutral, professional, as the spheres pulsed on screen, clinging to the husband like parasites.
Pause it,
one agent said, their voice calm but firm. The video froze, capturing the spheres mid-pulse. The agent leaned closer, their sharp eyes scanning the rippling surface.
Not organic,
they murmured.
But not mechanical either. Something in between.
The other agent nodded.
Send a retrieval team.
The knock came late at night, sharp and deliberate. She opened the door hesitantly, clutching her robe around her. A pair of men in dark suits stood on her porch, their faces impassive.
Ma'am,
one of them began, his tone clipped but polite.
We need to speak with you about your husband.
Her heart sank.
The police already told me there's nothing more they can do. We're not the police,
the second man said.
We specialize in unique cases.
She hesitated, her instincts telling her to slam the door, but curiosity, or perhaps desperation, kept her rooted.
What do you want?
Just some clarification, the first man said. His gaze drifted past her, landing on the camera sitting on the coffee table behind her.
May we come in?
They asked questions, precise and pointed. How long had her husband been exposed? What exactly had she seen? Did you notice anything unusual about the spheres? She answered as best as she could, though the memories felt jagged now, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. They didn't press when she faltered, their focus unshakable. One of them eventually gestured toward the camera.
We'll need to take that.
Her grip on the strap tightened.
Why?
It's standard procedure, the agent replied, his tone patient but firm, to ensure a thorough investigation. She wanted to protest, to demand answers, but the weight of her exhaustion made resistance feel pointless. With trembling hands, she handed the camera over.
Thank you,
the agent said.
We'll take care of everything from here.
Hours later, she sat at her kitchen table, staring blankly at her untouched cup of tea. Her memories felt foggy, like a half-remembered dream. The agents were gone, and so was the camera, but she couldn't quite recall the details of their visit. Something was missing, something important, but when she tried to focus on it, her thoughts slipped away. The Foundation's agents worked efficiently, transporting the body from the morgue in a sealed, reinforced container. The wife's camera was carefully packed alongside it, its memory card encrypted for immediate analysis. Meanwhile, back in the Caribbean, a Foundation submersible drifted just above the reef, its floodlights cutting through the dim, aquatic haze. Inside, a pair of agents monitored the readouts, their eyes flicking between the screens and the growing shadows outside.
This is the spot,
one of them said, his voice crackling through the comms.
Confirmed,
came the reply from the second submersible stationed a few hundred meters away.
Dive team, proceed.
2 divers exited the craft, their suits reinforced with layers of anomalous-resistant materials. They moved cautiously, their movement slow and deliberate as they descended toward the reef. Coral of every color stretched out before them, but the divers weren't here for the scenery. Their focus was on the metallic glints nestled between the coral branches.
There,
one of them whispered, as though afraid to disturb the water around him. The spheres sat unmoving, clustered together like predators lying in wait. Their surfaces were smooth and faintly iridescent, catching and bending the light in ways that made them seem alive.
Resemble bacteriophages,
the second diver muttered, his voice hushed, larger than expected.
Moving in.
A robotic arm extended from one of the diver's rigs, gripping a retrieval capsule designed to isolate and contain hazardous objects. As the arm reached for the nearest sphere, the water shifted. The sphere moved slightly, as if aware of their presence.
Hold position,
the lead diver ordered, his voice taut.
Confirm non-aggressive.
The sphere remained still, but its faint, rhythmic pulsing became visible, as though measuring the intruders. Carefully, the arm grasped the sphere and guided it toward the capsule. The rest of the cluster didn't react. One by one, the divers captured 3 additional specimens. Each was carefully isolated in its own capsule. The tension in the submarines didn't ease until the divers were safely inside again, and the craft began its ascent.
Specimen secured, the lead agent reported, returning to base.
The specimens arrived at the Foundation facility under heavy security. The research team assembled in the containment lab, their tools laid out on stainless steel trays. Cameras mounted on robotic arms hovered over the specimen, broadcasting a live feed to the observation room.
We'll start with the physical sample,
the lead researcher said, donning a pair of reinforced gloves.
Proceed with caution.
A robotic arm extended into the tank, holding a scalpel designed to withstand anomalous properties. The arm moved slowly, the scalpel inching toward the surface of the sphere. The moment the blade made contact, the sphere reacted. It vibrated violently, a pulse of energy rippling outward. The high-pitched sound that followed was deafening, piercing the air like a siren. Researchers clutched their ears, some dropping to the ground, as the glass of the containment unit fractured in spiderweb patterns.
Shut it down,
the lead researcher shouted, his voice barely audible over the noise. The vibration ceased as abruptly as it had started. The sphere returned to stillness, its surface unmarred by the scalpel. The researchers staggered to their feet, some still clutching their ears.
Status report,
the lead researcher demanded.
Containment glass is compromised,
a technician reported, their voice shaking.
Structural integrity at 60%, hearing damage sustained by at least 5 personnel.
Terminate the experiment, the researcher ordered grimly.
We're done here for now.
As the team evacuated the lab, the spheres remained in their tanks, silent but undeniably aware. In the observation room, the lead researcher stared at the fractured glass on the monitor.
It's not just reactive, they murmured. It's defensive, and it knows we're watching.
The containment lab was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. The fractured glass from the first incident had been replaced with a stronger alloy, and every movement in the room felt deliberate. No one spoke as technicians worked quietly at their stations, calibrating the equipment for the next phase of testing.
Begin stimuli sequence,
the lead researcher instructed. Their voice was steady, though their fingers tapped nervously against the edge of the console. In the observation room, monitors flickered as bright lights flashed within the containment tanks, bathing the spheres in alternating colors of red, blue, and white. The spheres didn't react. The next sequence followed, a series of escalating tones, each designed to provoke a response. Still, the spheres floated, lifeless and unmoving.
They're unresponsive,
a technician muttered, their pen scribbling quick notes. Their tone carried the frustration of someone who had been here too long.
Same as before.
The lead researcher glanced at the technician, their expression unreadable. They adjusted the controls, signaling the robotic arm. The machine moved slowly, extending a sealed vial into the tank. Inside, a small fish darted erratically. the glass confining its frantic movements. The vial opened, releasing the fish into the water. It swam a few uncertain laps, the bright light of the tank glinting off its scales. Then, it froze. The spheres moved as one. Filaments shot out from the nearest, impossibly fast and delicate. They coiled around the fish, binding it in place. The fish convulsed violently, its body jerking in ways that defied natural motion. Within seconds, it was still. Its once vivid colors dulled to lifeless gray. The technicians stared at the monitor, their notes forgotten. "It trained it," they said finally, the words quiet, almost reverent. The lead researcher straightened, their shoulders stiff. "End testing for the day?" Everyone, except for the lead researcher, left the lab. He sat hunched over a console, the glow of the screen casting shadows over their face. Their attention shifted to the tank. The researchers stood, pulling off their gloves. They stared at the tank, their expression a mix of curiosity and defiance. "It's reactive," they murmured to no one. Their hands flexed as if testing the air, hesitating. "But why?" Their gaze darted to the security camera in the corner. It was off, an intentional decision made hours earlier. Taking a deep breath, they stepped closer to the tank, removing the lid with careful precision. The sphere remained motionless, its surface dull and unremarkable. The researcher's hand hovered over the water for a moment before they plunged it in, the cold liquid biting at their skin. At first, nothing happened. Then, with terrifying speed, the sphere erupted to life. Filaments lashed out, wrapping around their wrist. They cried out, their body jerking as if struck by an electric current. The alarms blared to life, bathing the room in pulsing red light. Security personnel burst in moments later, weapons drawn. They hesitated at the sight before them, the researcher convulsing, their body twisted in unnatural angles, the sphere pulsing rhythmically, as though it had a heartbeat. "Do something!" one guard barked, but their colleagues stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the scene. The researcher collapsed abruptly. The filaments retracted, leaving the sphere still and silent once more. A medic rushed to the fallen figure, their movements quick and efficient. They knelt beside the body, searching for a pulse. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Reports flooded in, protocols rewritten overnight. The tanks were upgraded again, reinforced with experimental materials that could withstand its sudden bursts of energy. No personnel were allowed near the containment units without express clearance. This precarious anomaly, now known as SCP-371, is classified as Euclid. Resembling oversized bacteriophages with metallic iridescent surfaces, SCP-371 displays a blend of biological and anomalous characteristics that make it both enigmatic and deadly. Discovered in the Caribbean, SCP-371 demonstrates predatory behavior, attaching itself to host organisms, including humans. Once latched, it causes systemic failures without visible injuries, leaving victims drained and lifeless. The mechanism by which SCP-371 achieves this remains unclear, but appears to involve molecular-level integration with the host. Captured specimens are contained in reinforced aquatic units designed to mimic their natural saltwater environment. Testing revealed SCP-371's heightened responsiveness to live prey. It reacts instantly to the introduction of a live fish, draining it completely within seconds and leaving the remains desiccated. Attempts to physically analyze SCP-371 have triggered violent defensive responses, including vibrations that fracture containment glass and high-pitched sounds causing hearing loss. To date, SCP-371 remains in containment, monitored closely within its aquatic environment. Its Euclid classification reflects the unpredictable nature of its reactions and the potential for catastrophic failure should containment measures lapse. No further testing is authorized, and all access to SCP-371 requires explicit approval from the Foundation's highest-ranking personnel. And so, SCP-371 remains quietly pulsing in its reinforced aquatic tanks, plotting who knows what in its little metallic mind. The Foundation does not know if it's sentient, spiteful, or just really into live fish, but one thing's for sure: it's not going anywhere without a fight. SCP-1363 presents a unique challenge to our understanding of biological hazards. It's a highly contagious RNA virus, targeting human epithelial tissue with unsettling precision. Initial exposure leads to the prodromal stage, where the infected report a metallic taste and persistent headaches. Within days, Unsettling lesions resembling scrape marks appear on their skin, though these are mysteriously painless. It's during the chronic stage, however, that SCP-1363 reveals its truly bizarre nature. The lesions evolve, forming coherent words and sentences, apparently communicated by two distinct entities within the virus itself. Named SCP-1363-1-A and SCP-1363-1-B, these entities engage in conversation, seemingly possessing awareness and knowledge from the mid-20th century, specifically around nuclear physics, a vestige of their origins at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Their amicable demeanor belies the virus's lethal potential, leading to severe systemic effects and, in some cases, death. This is why containment is critical. SCP-1363 not only infects bodies, but weaves itself into the fabric of histories, leaving despair in its wake. Understanding SCP-1363 is not just a matter of science, it's a race against history itself. In 1946, a small town draped in the gentle hues of morning, as a young girl with lively eyes and a skip in her step made her way to school. The path wound through quiet country roads, lined with the remnants of autumn's touch. As the young girl approached a narrow bend, she noticed a man ahead, staggering and mumbling to himself. His arms were covered in strange marks that seemed to shift and move. Curious but cautious, the girl slowed her pace, her gaze fixed on the odd sight. The man, lost in his own world of discomfort, suddenly stumbled toward her. Reflexively, the girl put up her hand to shield herself, brushing against one of the lesions on the man's arm. The contact was brief, but in that instant, her hand came away with a slick, unusual feeling.
"Sorry, miss,"
the man gasped, clutching his head as he shuffled away, leaving the girl to stare after him, puzzled and slightly scared. Once at school, she rubbed her tired eyes with the same hand, unwittingly transferring whatever had lingered from the man's lesion. Throughout the day, a headache began to nag at her, growing in intensity. By the time she returned home, the discomfort was unbearable. Her parents, noticing her distress at dinner, advised her to drink more water, thinking perhaps the day's play had left her dehydrated. "Drink up, sweetheart, it'll help," her mother said, pushing a glass of water toward her. The girl tried to comply, but the water did little to ease the pounding in her head. Later that evening, as she changed into her pajamas, her mother noticed small, scrape-like lesions forming on her arms. "What happened at school today? Did you fall?" her mother asked, concern knitting her brow. "No, Mommy," the girl whispered, her voice strained by the throbbing in her skull. "It just started hurting." Her parents exchanged worried glances, attributing the mysterious symptoms to a possible flu, and decided to monitor her overnight, hoping a good night's rest would bring improvement. The next morning, the young girl's struggle to concentrate in class became evident. Every whisper of a classmate, every scratch of a pencil on paper amplified her headache to unbearable levels. Her teacher, a kind woman with a keen eye, noticed her distress. "You look pale," the teacher said, guiding her to the hallway. "Let's visit the nurse." In the nurse's office, the girl sat quietly, the fluorescent lights above seeming to pulse with each throb of her headache. The nurse, a meticulous woman with years of experience, examined her carefully. She gently touched the lesions, her expression growing concerned. "How did you get these?" the nurse asked, her voice low. "I don't know," the girl murmured, her eyes downcast. The nurse's suspicion ticked up a notch. Something didn't feel right. She made a decision, her hand steady as she picked up the phone and dialed Child Social Services. "I think you need to see this," she said, glancing back at the girl with a mix of worry and determination. Later that day, a car pulled up to the family home. Social Services, accompanied by a police officer, approached the front door. The girl's parents met them, confusion turning to horror as the reason for the visit was explained. "We need to ensure her safety," the social worker explained, avoiding the parents' pleading eyes as they protested, tears streaming down their faces. "No, you don't understand. She's not abused," her mother cried out, gripping the social worker's arm. Her father, equally distraught, tried to reason. "Please, she's just been ill. Let us take care of her." But their pleas went unheard. The girl, wrapped in a coat too big for her, looked back at her parents from the back seat of a social service vehicle, her face streaked with tears, her small voice lost in the cold wind. At the foster home, the girl found herself among strangers. Her symptoms, now evolving into whispered conversations from the lesions, went unnoticed by her overwhelmed foster parents. They overheard her murmuring responses to unseen voices and assumed she had conjured an imaginary friend to cope with her upheaval.
Who are you talking to, dear?
One foster parent asked, peering into her room late one night.
My arm,
the little girl replied, staring at the shifting words on her arms, her voice a whisper of fear and fascination. The other foster children glanced at her with curiosity, but none understood the gravity of her conversations with the lesions, mistaking them for the whims of a troubled mind. One afternoon, an older foster child watched the girl whispering to her arms. His curiosity piqued. He approached her.
"What are you playing?"
he asked, eyeing the strange patterns on her skin.
"It's not a game,"
she murmured, but he was too fascinated to heed her tone.
"Can I try?"
he insisted, reaching out to touch the lesions before she could stop him. His fingers traced the words, and he laughed.
"Cool, it's like magic."
But the laughter soon faded. Within days, the boy started complaining of headaches and a weird taste in his mouth. Not long after, similar lesions appeared on his skin, whispering secrets only he could hear. Meanwhile, the school nurse, who had been feeling increasingly unwell, noticed similar symptoms in herself. Remembering the girl and the lesions, she grew alarmed. With shaking hands, she dialed the CDC, her voice urgent as she described the symptoms and her fears.
"Something's very wrong," she explained. "It's like the disease is spreading through words."
Under the guise of public health officials, SCP Foundation agents arrived in the town, their presence calm yet authoritative. They moved with purpose, observing the behaviors and interactions of the townsfolk, especially those showing the mysterious symptoms of SCP-1363. The agents meticulously gathered data, blending in yet remaining apart, their notes becoming a catalog of the unfolding epidemic. It didn't take long for them to confirm the presence of an anomalous infectious agent. The designation SCP-1363 was quickly applied, and the real work began.
"Initiate containment protocol,"
one agent instructed, speaking into a concealed microphone. Teams of Foundation personnel, donned in biohazard suits, began the somber task of rounding up affected individuals. The girl, her symptoms now fully manifest, and the observant school nurse were among the first to be escorted to waiting, unmarked vans. Inside the containment facilities, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. Researchers and doctors worked in sterile rooms, their movements deliberate, covered from head to toe in protective gear. They examined each patient with precision, careful to avoid any contact that might spread the contagion to themselves. Back in the town, a subtle quarantine was enforced. The once lively streets grew quiet, the usual bustle replaced by the occasional sight of Foundation personnel and their unmarked vehicles. Residents peeked from behind curtains, their whispers filling the air with rumors and fear.
"What's happening?"
one townsperson asked another as they watched another neighbor being escorted away by suited figures.
"I heard it's some new kind of flu,"
the other replied, their voice low, tinged with uncertainty and fear. As the Foundation's presence became more noticeable, the reality of the situation began to sink in for the townsfolk. They were at the epicenter of something far beyond ordinary, a mysterious illness that could no longer be ignored. The town, now under the watchful eye of the Foundation, braced itself as the quiet quarantine tightened, a protective grip that held both safety and a whisper of something darker. At the containment center, the hum of scientific activity filled the air as researchers monitored the progression of SCP-1363 in its various stages. The atmosphere was tense, each team member aware of the unusual and dangerous nature of their subject. In a secured observation room, a Foundation doctor prepared to interview the lesions on the girl's arms. The setup was unusual. A camera focused on the girl's limbs, a microphone poised to catch every whisper from the sentient marks.
Let's begin,
the doctor said, his voice steady despite the surreal task. He addressed the legions directly, pen in hand, ready to record their responses.
Can you understand me?
The legions shifted, forming words that appeared on the girl's skin. Yes, they replied, the word slowly morphing on her arm.
How are you able to communicate?
The doctor continued, his fascination tempered with a clinical detachment necessary for his notes. Through her, the legions formed the reply, indicating their host. The doctor noted the response, then asked another question.
What do you want?
Exist, the legions spelled out, a simple yet chilling response that made the room's temperature feel a degree colder. As the interview proceeded, the researchers behind the observation glass took meticulous notes, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Each answer was analyzed, theories whispered back and forth about the implications of this communicative ability. The girl, for her part, sat quietly, her expression one of resigned discomfort. She had grown used to the odd sensations of her own skin speaking, yet the fear of what it meant lingered in her eyes. The session continued, with the doctor gently probing for more information about the origins and desires of SCP-1363-1, the entities living within the virus. Each answer brought them closer to understanding, yet the truth of SCP-1363 remained elusive, shrouded in biological mystery. As the day wound down, the researchers compiled their findings, the data a mix of scientific breakthrough and haunting medical anomaly. The containment center buzzed with the energy of discovery and the somber acknowledgement of the path ahead. The girl was returned to her room, her arms still whispering secrets only the Foundation could now hear. As we've seen, SCP-1363 is not just a medical anomaly. It's a window into the complexity of infectious diseases and their potential interactions with human psychology. After the acute and chronic stages, the virus enters what we will call the convalescent stage. This is where the levels of SCP-1363 in the blood begin to decline, leading to a gradual resolution of symptoms. Most subjects recover fully within a month, but let's not underestimate the psychological scars left behind. The virus fades, but the impact lingers. Survivors often report episodes of anxiety, nightmares, and in some cases, continued hallucinations. It's a stark reminder of the virus's potency. Now, let's talk containment. SCP-1363 is currently contained at Bioresearch Site 101 under the highest biosecurity protocols. The containment unit is designed to prevent any possibility of outbreak, with multiple redundancies in place. Every precaution is taken to ensure that SCP-1363 does not leave the confines of its containment cell. This includes specialized air filtration systems, double-sealed doors, and regular health screenings for all personnel involved in its management. The outbreak of 1946 taught us valuable lessons in containment and crisis management. We've applied these lessons to enhance our protocols, ensuring the safety of the public and the integrity of our research. As we continue to study SCP-1363, our goal remains clear: understand, contain, and mitigate. The stakes are high, but so is our commitment to safeguarding humanity. This concludes our briefing. Remember, vigilance is key, unless you want your next rash spelling out your secrets.
A man is lying in a hospital bed, and it is clear that he is not doing well. A group of doctors buzz around him performing various tests, checking his vital signs again and again. The man feels weak and a little disoriented, and the looks on the various doctors' faces tells him all he needs to know. Something is very wrong with him. Finally, there is a break in the commotion, and the doctors stop prodding at him and peering into his eyes with a bright, blinding light. All of the doctors and nurses leave the room except for one. The doctor steps towards the man and tells him that he has some bad news. You see, before the doctor can finish, someone else emerges from the shadows in the corner of the room and taps him on the shoulder. I'll handle this. The man hadn't noticed this person, but he can see now that he's dressed in a suit, and unlike the doctors, he doesn't have any identifying items like a name tag or badge. Maybe he's some kind of professor, or a renowned surgeon who is going to tell him how they will make him better. The doctor steps back from the bed, but the man in the suit tells the doctor that it would be best if he and the patient could be left alone. Just for a moment, of course. The doctor nods in agreement and leaves the room. The man in the suit waits until the door is closed behind him to continue. He tells the sick man that he has a rare condition, quite rare. So rare, in fact, that you're the only person to ever have it, the only recorded case in history. The man in the suit sits down on the bed next to the man and takes his hand, lifting it up, examining it. The man's hand is an odd color. It has a slight green tint to it, and the skin itself appears to be taking on a fibrous quality. The sick man feels very tired, but he manages to whisper, "Are you a doctor? Are you going to help me?" The man in the suit responds, "Yes, I'm a doctor. Of sorts. A doctor and a researcher. I work for a very important organization, and I specialize in cases just like yours. Well, not exactly like yours. You're unique. Quite special, in fact." The sick man offers a weak smile. I'm very lucky. Oh yes, very lucky indeed. Well, not because of your condition, of course, but because I am here. You see, if it's all right with you, we'd like for you to come with us, to come stay at one of our facilities for a while. We can't promise that we'll be able to figure out exactly what's happening or why. But if we can, we have a much better chance of figuring out how to cure it. To cure you, so you can go back to a normal life. Do I have much of a choice? The sick man asks. Of course you do. It's completely up to you. I think this would be your best course of action, your best by far in fact, but we can't force you to do anything you don't want to do. The sick man looks down at his greenish hand again, turning it over in front of his face, examining the small growths that seem to be sprouting from his skin. When do we leave? Right now, the man in the suit tells him. The nurses will come get you ready, and then we'll be on our way. The man in the suit leaves the room and closes the door behind him. Standing next to the door in the hallway are a pair of men wearing tactical uniforms like a SWAT team. The man in the suit tells them that luckily they won't be needed today. This one is coming easy. The sick man lies on a bed, but now he is in a new room. This one is even more sterile than the hospital, with cold concrete walls and harsh fluorescent lights. Just like in the hospital, he's surrounded by a seemingly never-ending cast of doctors, nurses, and researchers. They too poke and prod at him, take samples, and administer all kinds of tests. As time goes on, the man's condition only grows worse. It seems there's nothing that they can do to stop his condition from advancing. The green color spreads across his body, and his skin soon becomes woody and stiff. If he sits in one place for too long without moving, tiny fibers emerge from his skin, like probing roots looking for soil. All the while, the man grows weaker and more fragile. Even the slightest movement seems to cause him great pain. The doctor who originally brought the man to the facility gathers with a small group in the observation room next to the man's containment cell. They discuss the results of a recent test, which showed that much of the melanin in his skin has somehow been replaced with chlorophyll, and that the fibrous quality of his skin is being caused by the appearance of cellulose around his cells. In other words, he isn't just starting to look like a plant. He's truly becoming a plant. And there doesn't seem to be anything they can do to stop it. Try as they might, they haven't found a single clue as to what is causing the man's condition, or how to treat it. The man, though, seems strangely at peace with his fate. He's told that they're going to allow him to live, whether that be as a man or as a plant in containment, for as long as he can stay alive, and that he will be well taken care of to make the whole process as comfortable for him as possible. Even though they failed to find a cure for his anomalous disease, they will do everything in their power to make sure he doesn't suffer. A tragic yet familiar tale for the SCP Foundation. A normal person is subjected to an abnormal situation that completely changes their life, and not for the better. At least in this situation, the Foundation appears to have shown a rare glimpse of their own humanity, opting to make this safe class anomaly's existence as painless as possible, rather than force it to endure a lifetime of painful tests and studies. Or at least that's what you've been led to believe. Unfortunately, everything you've just seen about SCP-1500 is a lie. Those with Level 3 clearance, though, can learn the truth, which is that SCP-1500 is actually an extremely dangerous anomaly, whose true identity must be hidden from even the majority of the Foundation, for reasons you'll soon learn. SCP-1500 is not a man suffering from a condition that causes him to slowly transform into a plant-like being, but is actually a greenish-gray, smooth-skinned humanoid with no facial features at all. Its limbs are long and multi-jointed, and its abdomen is highly distended. The skin is exceptionally durable and tough, and though SCP-1500 has no visible sense organs like ears or a nose, it still appears to possess senses that are roughly equivalent to an average human's. The entity is incapable of speech, owing to its lack of a mouth, and it has not shown a need to eat, breathe, or sleep at all. In addition to the strange appearance of SCP-1500, its primary anomalous effect is the impact it has on any human that comes within its line of sight, or rather what would be its line of sight if it had any eyes. Those that do find that they will soon begin experiencing headaches, nausea, and an overwhelming sense of dread. These symptoms will increase over the next several minutes, with the headaches becoming more and more debilitating, and the feelings of nausea and fear growing until eventually the subject passes out. They will remain unconscious for roughly 15 seconds, after which they will awaken and claim to have no memory of ever being exposed to SCP-1500. But something else strange also happens to the subject after waking. When asked to describe the creature known as SCP-1500, they will no longer remark on its faceless head or long twisted limbs. Instead, they will describe the creature as being an average-looking Caucasian male. Even stranger is that to them, it now has a name, Zachary Callahan. In further interviews with subjects exposed to SCP-1500, it became clear that many of their memories had been reshaped to now include the entity in its human-looking Zachary Callahan form. They would often describe him as a close friend from childhood or early adulthood, and one that played a significant role in their lives. They also claim that they are perfectly capable of communicating with Zachary Callahan, able to carry on conversations with him, while all the observing researchers will see is an apparently one-sided conversation between the subject and the featureless gray-skinned creature. While Foundation personnel have found that they are able to remove the false memories from the subject's minds through the use of amnestics, they have yet to be able to reverse the effect that causes the subject to see SCP-1500 as a human being, and everyone who has been exposed continues to see the entity as Zachary Callahan forevermore. It is still unknown what kind of long-term effects this exposure may have or how dangerous to their mental or physical health it will turn out to be. Even more concerning is that evidence has emerged that SCP-1500 may be able to affect more than just those in its immediate presence. Recently, a United States senator was giving a televised speech on a rather uninteresting topic. The speech started out normal enough, but then the senator began to relay an anecdote about a childhood fishing trip he had taken with a friend. You won't be surprised to learn that according to the senator, the friend's name was none other than Zachary Callahan. Investigations into the senator's background concluded that there was no person by that name of the appropriate age in the area where he grew up. It was also discovered the senator had suffered an especially bad migraine at a dinner party the week before the speech. Further research into SCP-1500's memory-altering effects have also revealed that they might just be more intrusive than first believed. Rather than simply appearing as an old friend, subjects exposed to 1500 have begun to report that Zachary Callahan actually played a much more prominent role in their lives, either as a close relative, a parental figure, or even a former lover. In each of these cases, the subjects described their feelings for Zachary Callahan as ones of adoration, and that he made them feel protected and loved. Most troubling of all is a recent addendum to the SCP-1500 file, which describes the very latest research on the anomaly and its effects. It is now estimated that as many as 23,000 people all across the world have been affected by the creature, with the idea of Zachary Callahan implanted into their memories. It is unknown why it is trying to spread its influence so far and wide, but one clue that may point to a nefarious purpose is that it seems to be disproportionately targeting political and military figures, as well as SCP Foundation personnel. Following these new developments, classification of SCP-1500 to Keter was requested and granted. Due to the risk that SCP-1500 poses through its anomalous effects, and its powerful ability to influence those in positions of great power, it is permanently kept in a modified humanoid containment cell at Site-17. No personnel are allowed to enter into its containment chamber under any circumstances, nor are there security cameras in its cell. A false containment document describing a human male with an anomalous plant-like effect was placed in the database in order to deter further investigation into the real SCP-1500. And any personnel who experience painful, persistent headaches are immediately transferred away from Site-17, while any who attempt to breach containment are immediately terminated. Is SCP-1500 planting the seeds for something big by infiltrating the minds of some of the most influential people on Earth? Or is it merely looking for a connection, as it takes on a form that it wishes it could have, in the only way it can, inside an imagination? Perhaps one day, we will know the answer.
The scientist pulls his hand away sharply, unable to believe his own eyes. There's no way he just saw what he thinks he did. The dog's fur couldn't have moved on its own. Perhaps it was just his gentle stroke over her coat, her skin shifting beneath, or... No, it's a trick of the light. It has to have been. How else do you explain it? The dog sits, unfazed, clearly the same as she's always been. But a whimper reaches the scientist's ear. Even a man with the strongest willpower in the world would have felt his heart melt at the sound. She wants to be petted again, and her owner quickly obliges her. Even she's unaware what's wrong with her, what's been living with her since they returned from their trip. The scientist offers another light, cautious pet, but the dog isn't satisfied with such a meager offering. She whines again, letting him know she still hasn't received enough affection. So he reaches his hand out a third time and pats it against her fur. The dog lowers her head, resting it against his knee where he sits, contented. Under his palm, her owner tussles her smooth, well-groomed coat until he feels something tiny lash at his hand. It only lasts a split second, a fraction of a moment of time, but he feels it. A quick sensation, like touching the barb of a bee's stinger, if only for less time than it takes the clock on the wall to tick. Then, it's gone, departing as quickly as it arrived, save for the echoes of a tiny pain in the seconds that follow, each punctuated by the sound of the clock. The scientist looks at his palm, still feeling it, or feeling its absence, he isn't sure. But as far as his eyes can tell, there's nothing there. He looks at his dog, leans closer to her to see her fur, while cautiously putting a reassuring hand on her back. And this time, he's close enough to see them move. Shifting, slithering, bristling among the dog's hide, enough of them together that their individual movement is clear to see with the naked eye. It takes the scientist a moment to realize his other hand, the one he'd pet his dog with, had gone to his mouth in disbelief. Now they were living on him, too. Over the months that pass, he's never once aware just how many there are. He never notices, shaving, trimming as usual, without so much as a hair seeming out of place. Then he and his colleague, the expert, start looking deeper through microscopes at samples gathered from his dog. That's when he sees them for the first time. Dozens, too many to count. After that, he dreams of them, of tiny pinpricks burrowing into his skin at night, clawing deeper, one by one, until he too is just as covered in them as the dog. Dreams about them, or feels them. After they make their findings known, a rush of activity follows. The Foundation and the questions. They want to know all about the parasites. The scientist tells them to ask the expert. He just discovered them by accident. His colleague knows more about things too small to see. Then, one day, after dozens spent answering the same questions over and over again, the scientist is told by the Foundation that he's being taken elsewhere, somewhere he can help them in their efforts to understand the parasites. It's only when he wakes up, laying strapped to the vivisection table, that he realizes what his help will entail. The surgeons try their best to calm him, but the scientist can't stop screaming. They offer platitudes and false promises that everything will be all right as they pin down his flailing arms in their restraints. The scalpels mark out segments that are then pulled away and put in jars, samples taken to be examined under a microscope. Still, the scientist screams, because now he understands. They're living on him now, too. They're living under his skin. The SCP Foundation has since given this parasitic species the designation of SCP-189, known colloquially among personnel as the aptly descriptive Hair-Imitating parasite, or sometimes abbreviated as Parasite. By expanding on the research conducted by Dr. F and Dr. W, researchers working at the Foundation have successfully been able to observe and track the behavior of these parasites. Analysis has revealed SCP-189 is a type of parasitic roundworm that is capable of manifesting in any mammalian life form from dogs and cats to human beings. These parasites, as their colloquial name suggests, are capable of implanting themselves into a creature's body by camouflaging themselves as individual hairs, making them difficult to detect until it's too late. The infection process of SCP-189 typically begins when an uninfected mammal comes into direct contact with a creature carrying the hair-imitating parasites. A potential new host needs to be within close enough range to SCP-189 egg sacs in order for transmission to take place. These egg sacs require direct skin-to-skin contact, as each one is covered in a series of microscopic hooks. These hooks bear some similarities to those found on the cuticles of certain species of nematodes, small, worm-like parasites either found in animals and plants, living in soil, freshwater or marine environments, and occasionally even in vinegar, beer malts, and inside water-filled cracks deep within the Earth's crust. Upon making contact with an uninfected mammal, the SCP-189 egg sacs will become anchored to the surface of a new host's skin via those microscopic hooks. These eggs do, however, require a specific catalyst to hatch. Rather than new SCP-189 parasites being born the moment the egg sacs transfer onto skin, they won't emerge until coming into contact with a specific substance, sebum. Unfortunately, sebum is most commonly found in skin, produced by sebaceous glands beneath the surface of the skin where hair follicles are present. Sebum is an oily substance that prevents skin from drying out, and plays a vital role in maintaining a healthy skin barrier. While excess sebum can be cleared through a thorough skincare routine of cleaning and moisturizing, this does little to deter infections of SCP-189. Sebum will prompt anchored egg sacs to hatch, at which point the larvae inside will emerge and burrow into nearby hair follicles. Given the tiny, unobservable size of both the egg sacs and the emergent hairistic larvae, it is impossible to feel an SCP-189 infection as it occurs. Once burrowed beneath the skin inside a hair follicle, an SCP-189 larva will latch itself onto the base of the dermal papilla, beneath the root of a hair, located under the skin. Papilla are fed by capillaries, the smallest and most delicate blood vessels of the vascular system. These transport blood, nutrients, and oxygen to the various cells and mammalian organs and bodily systems, including supplying the papilla with the necessary ingredients to stimulate hair growth. Despite exactly how this has occurred, SCP-189 larvae have evolved to use the capillaries as a food source, as it grows over the course of 2 to 3 days. After this point, the now adult SCP-189 instance will have grown large enough to detach itself from the papilla. The fully matured worm will sever the hair fiber and essentially uproot an existing hair to quickly and discreetly take its place. As a fully developed adult SCP-189 instance, the parasite will fully envelop the papilla and the surrounding hair matrix, and then from that point onwards will feed on cells that are shed by the hair matrix. While these cells would, in an uninfected subject, form the hair fiber itself, an SCP-189 worm will use these to continuously grow longer without the subject's knowledge. Currently, SCP Foundation researchers are still baffled by how exactly this species of roundworm could have evolved, given how seamlessly it exploits the ordinary cellular behaviors of human beings and other mammals. Some theories among personnel suggest that SCP-189 was originally specifically biologically engineered to harness and feed on the typical hair-growing process by someone with an in-depth knowledge of how this bodily function occurs. There is, however, no evidence to support this notion, and staff are discouraged from speculating that these parasites were created intentionally via any anomalous means. While the remainder of the parasite exists beneath the skin, the only visible part of an adult SCP-189 instance is the worm's tail that extrudes outwards from the hair follicle inhabited by the parasite. The tail, resembling a hair, is able to camouflage itself by absorbing the pigments and keratin from the cells the parasite consumes. Keratin especially, as this is the protein that helps with the healthy growth of hair, as well as nails and the epidermis, the skin's outer layer. SCP-189 uses the body's natural keratin to form an outer cuticle, a thin protective layer that matches the pigmentation of an infected subject's hair. This allows for the parasites to avoid detection, as they are not only able to match the color of their host's hair, but the extruding tail of an SCP-189 worm is similar in diameter and length to a hair that would normally grow out of the follicle the parasite is burrowed into. Visually, this makes SCP-189 instances indistinguishable from normal hairs unless inspected more closely through the use of a microscope. Otherwise, a subject that has contracted an SCP-189 infection will be completely unaware that they are carrying an anomalous parasite, apart from other certain circumstances. For reasons that the Foundation is still yet to understand, while most instances of SCP-189 remain undetectable and are indistinguishable from hair, others will occasionally move independently. Some specimens of SCP-189 worms have been observed flexing their tails, coiling or uncoiling, and lashing their hair-like extrusions in response to certain tactile stimulation. It is unclear why some instances of these parasites will seemingly attack other organisms, and this behavior has only been observed in a handful of specimens. Some Foundation experts in anomalous parasitology have suggested that the movements could be an involuntary response by the parasites to external stimuli, while others argue that it only occurs when an SCP-189 instance is threatened. Certain other proposed explanations for these movements have been expunged from the SCP Foundation Archive's entry on SCP-189. Unfortunately for those infected, and alarmingly for those who have observed them, SCP-189 infections are in no way benign. Far from it, actually, as instead of simply nestling under the skin and feeding on cells indefinitely, once SCP-189 parasites reach adulthood, they will begin the next phase of their life cycle. Similarly to other documented species of roundworms, SCP-189 instances are capable of creating and fertilizing their own eggs, producing between 1 and 3 at a time. which are then contained within a protective egg sac ready to be passed on to the next available host. The egg sacs themselves are similarly difficult to detect, as they are incorporated into the extruding tail that extends from beneath the skin. Once they become part of the hair-like tail, the egg sacs will develop their microscopic hooks as they mature. Then, once the tail grows to over a millimeter above the surface of the host's skin, they will be primed to pass on to a new subject. Fully developed SCP-189 egg sacs are loosely embedded in the tail's cuticle, and once they come into contact with the surface of a suitable host, its hooks will latch onto their skin and allow it to be pulled free from its parent. However, this process doesn't exclusively result in SCP-189 egg sacs passing from one host to the next. If the hooks are able to embed themselves in the skin of the current, existing host, then these unhatched larvae will spread onto the original subject, allowing the parasites to further infest a single mammal if they are unable to transfer it to a new host. Now, Foundation researchers have discovered that SCP-189's camouflage, appearing as ordinary hair, can be used against these parasites. As one might expect, the tails that extrude from a host's skin aren't any thicker or more durable than ordinary hair. Similarly, the head, buried beneath the skin in the hair follicle, is not attached any stronger than the root of an ordinary hair. This means that, provided the Foundation are able to identify an SCP-189 infection before the worm produces eggs and either spreads or further infects the host, there is the possibility for the parasites to be removed. Much like the hair it imitates, the parasite's tail can be broken or cut off, or the entire organism can be plucked out, or otherwise removed in the same way that ordinary hair can be. Once severed, the tail portion of an adult SCP-189 parasite can regenerate, growing a new head, becoming a separate instance of the worm. However, this is only possible if they are able to attach to a new host. Otherwise, they will starve and expire without access to capillaries of cells to feed on. Given that instances of SCP-189 that have their tails cut off can simply regrow this part of themselves, extraction of the entire organism is recommended by the SCP Foundation's trichology experts. Hair follicles containing active SCP-189 parasites can all die, owing to completely natural causes and conditions that can trigger hair loss. Any event that causes the loss of a follicle's hair similarly removes an SCP-189 parasite, forcing them to detach from their hosts, after which point they will usually die within an hour, although can last as long as 6 while separated from their previous host. Even dead adult instances of SCP-189 can pose an infection risk, though, as the eggs that they produce can remain viable for several years, meaning even if a new subject comes into direct contact with the deceased SCP-189 worm, its egg sac can still embed its hooks into their skin and pass on the parasitic infection. By far the most alarming characteristic of SCP-189 are their effects on an already dead mammal. Even if a host dies, SCP-189 specimens will continue to survive and feed on what is left of the creature's body by burrowing into their tissues. This can allow the parasites to continue to produce eggs and spread over the corpse, however, only until the deceased host begins to decay. Once this inevitable process begins, SCP-189 worms are killed by the toxins produced as the body breaks down post-mortem. However, they are still able to pass on to any that come into contact with the corpse before decay begins. In cases of SCP-189 infections in humans, coroners and morticians examining and handling bodies carrying the parasites quickly become the new host for parasite larvae. While their name has been expunged from Foundation records, the doctor responsible for the discovery of the SCP-189 parasites certainly wouldn't be quick to forget what they had uncovered. During a 6-month trip to a remote area of rainforest in a redacted part of the world, Dr. F was intending to spend the duration of their time focused on their biodiversity study, and they would have had it not been for Kara. 3 years old at the time, Kara was Dr. F's pet golden retriever and had been brought along by her owner to join the expedition. During the trip, Kara became infected with numerous instances of SCP-189. As far as records indicate, Kara was the first known infectee of this rare species of parasite. This initially went unnoticed by Dr. F, who eventually returned to the United States with Kara alongside them. By this time, it was estimated that approximately 80% of the dog's hair follicles had been infested with the parasites. Human beings possess 5 million hair follicles over their bodies, equating to between 1,800 and 3,000 hairs per inch. On average, a dog can have 15,000 strands of hair per inch of skin. Several days after making their return to the United States, Dr. F noticed while petting Kara that the retriever's fur was moving, or more accurately, the parasites were. And the close contact likely passed on multiple instances of SCP-189 to the doctor. Recognizing the abnormal infection, Dr. F contacted a parasitologist, whose name is similarly redacted from Foundation files. Dr. W received an invitation to study the newly discovered organism, and alongside Dr. F, the two submitted an academic paper detailing their findings. Upon receiving word of this paper, the SCP Foundation became aware of the existence of SCP-189 and responded by arresting both Dr. F and Dr. W. The pair were taken into Foundation custody, and their research materials, anything linking to SCP-189, were seized to prevent knowledge of these parasites being available to the public. While for some, being taken into custody by the SCP Foundation would likely be the last anyone ever heard from them, both Dr. F and Dr. W were instead recruited. Both became affiliated with the Foundation, and Dr. W was assigned to be the lead researcher in charge of SCP-189, given their background in parasitology. They were stationed in an undisclosed location to investigate indigenous populations of SCP-189 and determine solutions for their containment or extermination. Dr. F's whereabouts have been expunged from Foundation records. Presently, the Foundation has several samples of SCP-189 that it keeps stored at a classified cryogenic containment facility. Any samples kept at this facility that exceed an amount the Foundation is able to contain safely are to be destroyed via incineration immediately. Test subjects who have been infected with the parasite are kept in a sealed containment chamber with an airlock and chemical shower. Personnel that interact with these infected test subjects are required to wear standard NBC hazmat suits during their time inside, and must undergo a chemical shower before exiting the airlock and leaving the area. Whenever test subjects die, whether through the natural result of their infection or by termination, their bodies must be sealed in an airtight body bag, which will then be put through the same chemical shower prior to removal from the chamber. Then it is to be thrown into the incinerator. Should these containment measures fail, and a staff member find themselves unintentionally infested with SCP-189, they are to be quarantined in the same manner as test subjects and treated with anti-parasitic agent 189-A. If any human or animal at a Foundation site is determined to have an infestation of SCP-189, every living being on site must be inspected according to procedure. Staff members should then be treated, while D-Class and non-SCP animals must be terminated and incinerated, after which the facility is to be cleaned thoroughly with anti-parasitic agent 189-A. Cases of SCP-189 found outside of the Foundation must be taken into custody and quarantined immediately. Animals are to be euthanized and their bodies incinerated, while humans may be treated with the anti-parasitic agent and administered Class C or B amnestics. Individuals who have been or may have been in close contact with the infected must be checked for infestation and treated if necessary. A document containing suitable cover stories may be provided upon request, and can include covers such as gas leaks, bedbug infestations, and outbreaks of bird flu. Since the initial discovery of SCP-189 and the Foundation becoming subsequently aware of their existence, there have been numerous infestation incidents documented in various parts of the world. The source of infections outside of the SCP Foundation remains unknown. Theories range from the presumed existence of a previously unseen group of carriers transmitting the hair-imitating parasites to new infectees, or some other shared point of origin for these parasites, with some researchers suggesting there could exist a patient zero for infections, or an organism capable of spawning more instances of SCP-189, similarly to a queen in some insect populations. A considerable number of human beings and animals have been confirmed to have contracted one or more SCP-189 instances. The Foundation is working tirelessly to monitor outbreaks and ensure that the public remains unaware that there could be anomalous parasites living in their scalps.
It's 1 o'clock in the morning on a work night, and the last of the bar hoppers and clubgoers have long since turned in. At the end of the street, the last bar is finally closing down for the night. Or it would, except that the bartender is having trouble getting rid of a customer. Sitting at the bar, an old derelict is demanding yet another drink. The bartender grumbles in annoyance. This derelict is sloppy drunk, and the bartender just wants to go home. "Closing time," growls the bartender. "Just one more," protests the derelict, shaking his empty glass for emphasis. "I've got money." He laughs at his own words, his giggles ending with a loud belch that blows a cloud of aromatic vapor into the bartender's face. That's it. This derelict has been hanging out at this bar causing trouble all night, and the bartender has had enough. "Get out of here," says the bartender as he hustles the wobbling derelict out the door. "You're done." The derelict creaks and totters as he stumbles out into the street. The night's festivities are really hitting him. It isn't so often that he's got the money to burn, but when he does, he likes to spend it here. The prices are right, and the conversation is minimal, which is just the way that he likes it. The derelict turns around, fire in his eyes. He's raring to fight, and he doesn't care that the bartender is quite a bit larger than he is. Right now, all he can see is red. "Don't tell me when I've had enough," he slurs, raising his fists as he prepares to lash out. But the bartender has already slammed the door in his face. Defeated, the derelict turns his back on the closed bar and starts a slow stumble down the street. "Stupid bartender," mutters the derelict, turning up his collar against the cold bite of the night air. He wishes that he just had one more drink to warm his stomach against the chill. He's so out of it that he doesn't stop to think that the bartender did him a favor by refusing to fight. There is no way that the derelict would have won that battle. Even if he was in his physical prime, even if the bartender wasn't twice his size, the derelict is in no shape to fight. His vision is blurry and his head is swimming. In fact, he can barely remain upright. If he had any sense, he would probably stumble home and sleep this off. But the night is young, and he's not ready to give up yet. He walks down the street, eyeing every storefront in hopes of finding another bar. Unfortunately, every window has a closed sign in it. He swears under his breath. What a run of bad luck. What's a guy supposed to do in this town, he wonders. Just when he's about to give up hope, he spies something glinting in the reflective halo of a street lamp. He stumbles closer to get a better look, and he can hardly believe his eyes. Finally, his luck is changing. Someone has abandoned a half-empty bottle. "Well, hello there, little friend," says the derelict. He struggles to focus, but the world is spinning. In his confusion, he could swear he's seeing things. But no, he can feel the heft of the glass bottle in his hand, and he knows that it is as real as he is. "Who left you behind? Who would leave a perfectly good bottle just sitting out here?" He recognizes this brand. There's only about 3 fingers of liquid left, but that's better than nothing. Some people might balk at drinking out of a random bottle that you found on the street, but the derelict doesn't give it a second thought. He tips the bottle back and slurps it all down. It burns going down, just as it should, he thinks. He sighs in contentment as he feels the harsh liquid warm his stomach. Perfect. That really hit the spot. But what happens next surprises him so much that he can't believe his eyes. There's still liquid in the bottle. He blinks, wondering if maybe his adult brain is playing tricks on him, but he shakes the bottle cautiously and is rewarded with a telltale swish of liquid. That's no illusion. He takes another swig, guzzling it down. Normally, he'd drop the bottle to the ground and stumble on, but something makes him pause. He maintains his grip on the bottleneck and raises it again to take another look. And sure enough, there's still more left in the bottle. The derelict cannot believe his luck. He feels like he must have won the lottery. He's found a never-ending bottle. Already his mind is reeling with possibilities. "That bartender really thinks he's so smart," he mutters to himself as he weaves unsteadily. "But I don't need him anymore. See if I ever go to this stupid bar again. He just lost his best customer. Now that I have you, little bottle, I don't ever need to pay for drinks ever again." "It's the best day of my life," crows the derelict, raising his arms in triumph. He's barely able to stagger back to his home, a seedy apartment on the bad side of town, before he passes out on the floor. The morning sun rouses the slumbering derelict, and he rises with a groan. His whole body aches, and his mouth feels dry and parched. That's par for the course after a night of drinking, but somehow this hangover feels different. He puts that thought out of his mind as his mind returns to the strange, never-empty bottle that he discovered the night before. It's lying on its side on the floor next to him. He reaches for the mysterious bottle, only to find that, in fact, the previous night was not a dream. The bottle still contains just as much as it did the night before. He can't explain it, but the derelict isn't about to question his good fortune. He lifts himself to his feet and walks slowly into the bathroom. He's feeling a hangover like he's never felt before. His head is pounding and his throat is dry. His tongue feels swollen and sluggish inside his mouth, but he knows how to handle it. A little hair of the dog is all you need to help with the hangover. He takes another gulp from his bottle, but this time it brings little relief. And he notices something else strange too. It's his scalp. The skin on his head has started to itch, and he can't stop scratching. He feels like he's got the world's worst dandruff problem. He should probably take a shower, he thinks. He strips down and steps into the tub, turning the hot water on full blast and letting it wash over him. The shower only brings him temporary relief. Afterward, as he dries himself off, the towels feel rough and abrasive against his skin. His skin comes off in big, flaky patches, and his nails leave red trails in their wake. What's that? Is that blood? He examines his fingers to see that his nails have grown into ragged, claw-like talons. With a frightened yelp, he bites them off. It's easy to do. Although they look formidable, his fingernails are weak and brittle, almost as if he's dealing with a sudden calcium deficiency. What could be wrong with him? He remembers all the warnings he heard back in school when they used to march everyone into assembly to listen to lectures from the local police. At the time, he scoffed at the long lists of scary-sounding consequences of a lifetime of drinking, but now, he's not so sure. "It's probably nothing," he says as he examines himself in the bathroom mirror. His skin looks blotchy and infected. It doesn't take long before his hair and nails are out of control. His hair grows down to his shoulders, but comes out in big, ragged clumps if he runs his fingers through it. His claw-like fingernails are constantly breaking and cracking until his fingertips are bloody, and his quick is itchy and infected. If his habits had left him looking worse for wear before, he really looks awful now. For the next week, he barely leaves the apartment. He pulls the curtains and keeps the lights off, afraid that someone might see him. When the landlord bangs on the door, shouting that rent is late and demanding that the derelict hand over the money, he doesn't answer. He waits. The landlord gives up for now. That's good, thinks the derelict. It will give him time to think, time to figure out what to do about his disease. He knows that something is not right. Many of the local bartenders are, by now, probably wondering where he's gone. It's not like the derelict to stay away. He's practically kept the bar industry in this town afloat all by himself. It must be something major indeed to keep him away from his favorite poison. Luckily, he still has the bottomless bottle to comfort him during this trying time. The derelict is certain that he's caught some bad bug, but he thinks that he can wait it out. All he needs to do is make it through the next week, and everything will be fine. Sipping free drinks helps him to pass the time in a pleasant stupor as he waits for his health to return. Unfortunately, things are only going to get worse for him. His hair and fingernails keep growing, to the point that he has trouble lifting the bottle without his twisted nails getting in the way. His dry, flaky skin is changing as well, becoming thick and leathery and hanging off him in great folds like the hide of an elephant or a rhinoceros. His skin continues to grow, until the folds flop over his knees and gradually hang lower and lower until they touch the ground. Moving is harder now that he's carrying so much extra weight. He thought at first he just had a nasty bug, but he's clearly picked up some weird skin condition, and even this derelict, sodded as he might be, suspects exactly where he got it. It's got to be that crazy bottomless bottle. He can't think of another reason. Even so, he can't bring himself to part with this little gift from heaven. Even in his darkest hour, a few sips of liquid courage always helps to calm his nerves. He considers lumbering down to the free clinic in hopes that they might be able to cure him or at least tell him what's wrong with his skin. But he thinks better of this option. What if he's got some weird alien parasite that no one has ever seen before? They might lock him away in some government lab or something. No, he reasons, it's better to wait it out. He'll sleep it off, swear off the sauce for a little while, and maybe it'll pass. In desperation, the derelict drags himself across the floor, hoping to at least find some solace away from human contact. He locks himself into his bedroom while he's still able to manipulate the lock on his door. The extra folds of skin are hanging off of his hands and arms, making it hard to do anything. The extra skin is so heavy that he can't walk much carrying all that extra weight. He lies on the floor of his bedroom, away from everything, and hopes that tomorrow, when he wakes up, this will just be a fading dream. The only thing that brings him solace is the never-ending bottle, which, even now in his advanced state of decay, he keeps close by him. After all, he reasons, the damage is already done. What could possibly be the harm in enjoying a nice drink? A week later, his condition has not passed. The landlord is back, and this time he's not taking no for an answer. The landlord isn't supposed to enter his tenant's apartment without permission, but he doesn't care. He uses his own key to unlock the door and go inside. The condition of the apartment is appalling. The furniture is broken, the floor is covered with unidentifiable filth, and there's a rotten stench in the air. The landlord wants to throw up as the full weight of the musty smell hits him in the face. It's as if someone has been living in here without any ventilation, with all the windows firmly closed and sealed. A sudden noise from the bathroom draws his attention. Of course, thinks the landlord, that old bum is hiding in there. He thinks I won't find him. The landlord steals his resolve and heads towards the bathroom, determined to get the money that he feels is owed to him. But what greets him when he steps through the door isn't the derelict anymore. It isn't even human. The creature in the bathroom is a massive pile of ambulatory skin folds. The skin flaps have grown so large and cumbersome that the derelict within can barely move. They sprout all over his body, covering him so that he looks more like some kind of alien sea cucumber now than any human. The landlord stumbles backwards, screaming in terror at the sight, unable to comprehend what he's looking at. Improbably, the creature reacts to the noise, and a ripple of movement spreads across its surface. It starts to move, despite not having any legs. The landlord is so terrified that he doesn't notice the glass bottle that suddenly drops from between the creature's skin folds as it starts to move toward him. The same bottle, still with 3 fingers of liquid inside. How could something like this happen? What parasite or disease did the derelict contract from the miracle bottle he found? Sadly, this never-ending bottle isn't a boon, but a curse, and the man who found it that night became just another victim of what the SCP Foundation has classified as SCP-420. SCP-420 looks like a perfectly ordinary bottle of a certain popular libation, even to the point that it bears the label of a common brand. The bottle always contains a small amount of a mysterious liquid known as SCP-420-1. If this liquid is poured out, SCP-420 will always replenish itself. When SCP-420-1 is potent, it is physically, chemically, and molecularly indistinguishable from ordinary whiskey, although drinking will have an effect far greater than even the strongest liquor. When SCP-420-1 is poured out of SCP-420, though, it undergoes a strange transformation, eventually losing its potency and changing until it is indistinguishable physically, chemically, or molecularly from urine. Consuming potent SCP-420-1 instigates a bizarre physical transformation called SCP-420-2 in 6 stages. In Stage 1, beginning 12 hours after consumption, the subject will start to have difficulty speaking, resulting in slurred speech that is not consistent with normal alcohol inebriation. Their fingernails, toenails, and hair will start to grow at an accelerated rate, but also become brittle and prone to breakage. Nail breakage to the quick often leads to bleeding and infection. The Foundation has had some success in curing SCP-420-2 if it is caught when still in Stage 1, treating it as if it is an aggressive form of cancer with radiation and chemotherapy, as well as a constant intravenous supply of Formula 420A09T-T174B. Victims thus treated have a 73% recovery rate, but a 21% fatality rate. From Phase 2 onward, this protocol can slow the spread of SCP-420-2, but will not stop it entirely. In Stage 2, beginning 1 to 2 weeks after Stage 1, the subject's skin begins to show similar properties to those exhibited by hair and fingernails in Stage 1, becoming dry, brittle, and prone to cracking. As old skin flakes off, the subject's new skin begins to grow at an accelerated rate, eventually forming thick, leathery folds all over the subject's body. Skin flaps growing inside the mouth interfere with speech and eventually render subjects mute, but do not appear to impede breathing or eating. Indeed, subjects in Stage 2 exhibit a renewed interest in eating, possibly because the subject's body requires additional nutrients and calories to build the increasingly heavy armor of thickened, calloused skin. Stage 2 subjects will eat anything that they can get their hands on, and many die after attempting to eat poisonous or inedible objects. In Stage 3, beginning 3 to 6 weeks after Stage 2, nerves in the skin layer grow uncontrollably, but no longer connect to the victim's central nervous system. Genetic testing of the skin in this stage reveals that its DNA has become so mutated that it can no longer be classified as human. It is, in fact, a separate and very inhuman organism that almost acts as a parasite growing from the human host. The skin may develop tumor-like growths, which appear to be analogous to human muscle and secretory cells. Hair and fingernails sprout randomly from the mass of skin. By Stage 4, beginning 3 to 7 days after Stage 3, the skin has become a mass of thick, leathery folds, completely covering the human host to the point that they disappear completely. The skin begins to exhibit random twitching movements, as though it is indeed a living organism finally coming into its own as a life form and testing out its new body. The human subject within the skin continues to eat, although brain scans reveal that they are no longer in control of their mouth. Instead, the skin entity forces the mouth to move by moving the attached skin. Small holes begin to form in the skin, eventually growing into narrow tunnels or throats that lead back to the now trapped body of the helpless subject. The subject is still consumed with a ravenous hunger and will eat anything that they can get in their mouth. In Stage 5, beginning 1 to 2 days after Stage 4,
the skin begins to move in patterns indicating rudimentary intelligence. The skin, although still attached to the original subject, is now completely and distinctly non-human. It is its own organism. It can move of its own accord, dragging the trapped host along for the ride, and it moves and feeds much in the manner of an extremely large amoeba. It feeds by excreting a digestive enzyme onto foodstuffs and then enveloping the nutrients with its skin folds, again like an amoeba surrounding its food. The food is taken into the throats. These tunnels connecting the outside of the skin to the now completely subsumed host are now directly connected to the host's circulatory system and function as additional mouths. They can consume nutrients which are moved down their length by bristly hairs and further broken down by grinding keratinous plates before being taken into the host's body. Most hosts will remain in Stage 5 indefinitely, although there still remains a much more dangerous Stage 6 yet to come. At this time, it's unknown what factor triggers SCP-420-2 to develop into Stage 6. Little information about Stage 6 is available at this time, although it is known that it involves even more accelerated skin and keratin growth, resulting in a sudden increase in size and mass. Perhaps the most terrifying part of the entire transformation is that the host remains alive for the duration of the process, and sometimes even after SCP-420-2 has settled comfortably into its new life at Stage 5. Mercifully, most hosts will have completely succumbed to insanity by this point, although some are shown by brain scans to still be self-aware and quite calm, perhaps fading into a Zen-like state as they accept the inevitability of their fate. SCP-420 is contained in a storage locker at an undisclosed site maintained by the Foundation, and it is only to be removed from this locker by SCP staff with Level 3 clearance or higher. It has been given the Safe class because, despite the horrifying nature of its effects, at least it doesn't move anywhere. Samples of SCP-420-1 not in use by testing should be stored in the container marked SCP-420-1 Decon in Locker 1014-420 until they lose potency, at which time they can be disposed of as biohazardous liquid waste. Victims infected with SCP-420-2 are not contagious and should be contained in standard solitary D-Class secure confinement. On reaching Phase 3, subjects should receive double rations. Due to the extreme danger of Phase 6, any subjects who reach Phase 4 should be closely monitored for signs that the condition may be advancing further, in which case they are to be immediately destroyed by incineration. Knowing the fate that befalls victims of SCP-420 should make anyone think twice about drinking out of a random bottle that you just found in the street. Though personally, I think that's just common sense.
A man wakes up with a start. Did something just bite him? He looks down at his hand. Something definitely bit him. He can see the red welt already forming. He looks around for the culprit, but can't find it anywhere. He really hopes he doesn't have bed bugs. That's the last thing he needs right now. He'll have to keep his eyes open for potential pests. He doesn't want this to happen again, since the spot is already starting to itch and feel uncomfortable. A couple days pass, though, with no signs of other bugs. It must have just been a random insect that came inside his house to escape the winter cold. The spot on his hand felt a little rough for a day or two, but now he's pretty much forgotten all about it. Now what he really needs is some coffee before sitting down to another coding session. The man is in his kitchen trying to make a fresh pot of coffee, but finds he's having a hard time. He's not so much making coffee as he is making a mess. He knocks his favorite mug onto the ground, breaking it, and decides that maybe he doesn't need coffee after all. A couple of nights later, as the man is watching TV, he starts to cough. Just a little at first, but then more and more. The coughing fits get longer and deeper too, like they are coming from the very bottom of his lungs. He hopes he isn't coming down with something. He hasn't left the house in days, so how could he have? Can bugs transfer colds? He'll have to look it up later. For now, he needs to do something about this cough. He won't be able to sleep if it keeps up. He needs to go get some medicine. The man gets bundled up and heads out. It's lightly snowing as he walks to the pharmacy, and he can't help but admire the way the moon hangs in the sky, a beautiful beacon of light on this dark winter evening. Inside the pharmacy, he finds the cold medicine section and picks out a cough suppressant. He takes it to the counter and decides to get a few candy bars, too. He's developed a real sweet tooth these last few days. The man starts to cough again. It's a good thing he's getting this medicine. Several more days pass, and the man isn't feeling any better. This cough just won't go away. He decides it's finally time to go see a doctor. As he sits in the doctor's office waiting room, he does his best to hold in his coughs, but he has a very hard time. The woman on the other side of the room is coughing too. Strangely, it actually makes him feel a little better. There must just be something going around. A nurse comes into the waiting room and calls his name. The doctor is ready for him. The man is sitting on the bed in the examination room when the doctor enters. He's looking over his medical records and doesn't even look up from his clipboard. He tells the man to take off his shirt so that he can be examined, and the man obliges. "Okay, let's see what the trouble is," the doctor says. He finally looks up at the man and screams. It didn't take long for the SCP Foundation to hear the reports of people's limbs metamorphosing into insectoid appendages, and they knew immediately what they were dealing with. This was another outbreak of the parasitic, limb-transforming insect known as SCP-150. SCP-150 is an obligate parasite, meaning that it requires a host for the completion of its reproductive life cycle. It bears a visual appearance similar to that of Cymothua exigua, another parasite that eats the tongue of a particular type of fish before replacing the tongue with its own body. SCP-150 engages in similar behavior, though it appears to exclusively affect humans. When a human comes in contact with the small bug-like organism, it will embed itself under its new host's skin. Next, over the course of roughly 7 days, SCP-150 will burrow deep into the host's flesh and begin to cause numerous physiological changes to them. First, and most prominently, SCP-150 will begin a gradual process of altering the limb that is nearest to the original infection site. As SCP-150 burrows deeper and consumes the flesh, it excretes a substance that has the effect of replacing the missing sections of the limb with a hard, chitinous material that resembles one of its own appendages. Beneath the chitin, the excreted substance forms a rudimentary nervous system that gives the host the ability to control the new limb as if it were their own. As it feeds, SCP-150 also secretes several chemicals that contain anesthetic, immunosuppressant, and transplant-rejecting properties that keep the host's body from responding to the changes, or even reacting at all. In fact, the host will often report that their new limb is completely normal and feels stronger and more resilient after the transformation. SCP-150 will continue to feed for approximately 1 to 2 weeks, and as it feeds on the nutrients within its host's body, it will begin to reproduce, creating eggs that it deposits directly into the bloodstream. While the majority of these eggs will die off, enough usually survive to begin colonizing other parts of the host's body, where they will hatch and repeat the process of feeding, reproducing, and spreading more eggs. It is theorized that it is capable of reproducing on its own, meaning that a single instance of SCP-150 is all it takes to create a new colony. Humans infected with SCP-150 will sometimes report slight discomfort and issues with their fine motor skills during this period, but will usually not express any knowledge of what might be causing this. Eventually, SCP-150 eggs will reach the host's lungs, where the process of assimilating continues, this time replacing the lungs themselves. During this process, more eggs will be produced, laid, and then spread out of the body by the host's coughing. As many as 10,000 eggs will be produced during this period, approximately 1% of which will survive being expelled, find another host, and implant themselves. The assimilation process then spreads to the central nervous system, including the spinal cord and brain, but strangely, the host will show no signs that their consciousness or behavior have been affected in any way. In interviews with hosts of SCP-150, those who are unaware that they are infected have not expressed any knowledge of changes happening in or out of their body. When subjects are made aware that they have been infected, they will be able to point out the site of the original infection and agree that a change has taken place, but they seem to have no ill will towards their new chitinous appendages and will often express positive feelings about it. In order to better study the effects of SCP-150 under SCP Foundation control, 2 D-Class personnel, D-13732 and D-016002, were both infected with the parasites, and the assimilation process was allowed to fully progress through all the stages. Following signs that D-016002 was experiencing swelling of the brain, a decompressive craniotomy was performed, a procedure in which a portion of the skull is removed in order to relieve pressure on the brain. This surgery had the added benefit of giving Foundation researchers the chance to look at SCP-150's progress firsthand. But after a flap of her skull was removed, the attending scientists did not find that her brain was swelling. They didn't find her brain at all, but instead, observed numerous instances of SCP-150 in the cavity where her brain should be. The D-Class had been partially anesthetized to numb her skull but remained conscious during the procedure, and the scientists asked her several simple questions to which she was perfectly able to answer. They began removing some of the parasites, and as they did so, her answers became slower and less clear. It appeared that the SCP-150 instances had not just eaten and replaced her brain, they had become her brain. For the next experiment, they would use the instances of SCP-150 that had been removed from D-13732's nervous system after he had been euthanized following the discovery that his entire nervous system had also been replaced entirely by SCP-150. The parasites taken from his brain cavity were placed into D-016002s, and the results were nothing short of incredible. After observing a period of time where the organisms appeared to move and rearrange themselves within her skull, she regained consciousness. Once awake, not only did her cognitive functions immediately improve, when she was asked to state her name, she told them it was Michael, D-13732's name. It is unknown why SCP-150 engages in this peculiar life cycle, but the danger it poses to humans and the difficulty in keeping it contained has led the SCP Foundation to classify it as Keter. Some of the more erudite researchers have taken to calling the parasite the ship of Theseus, a play on the philosophical notion that questions whether something that has had all of its parts replaced is still fundamentally the same, or if it has become something new. Perhaps the observation of those infected with SCP-150 can shed some light on this millennia-old question. Infected patients who are being studied are to be kept in Level 3 biohazard containment cells, with never more than one infected host per cell. Cultures of SCP-150 adults and eggs are kept in vacuum-sealed glass flasks in the Site-42 Infectious Materials Lab, and the Foundation's standard pathogen handling procedures are required to be followed at all times. Should any instance of SCP-150 be found outside of containment, it is to be immediately incinerated.
July 18, 2014. The calm and peaceful tranquility of the day has just been disrupted by the squawk of a panicked report over the radio. Civilians in danger. Urgent assistance required. The park ranger hears the screams carried through the trees by the wind a second later, already hurtling his way toward the location given by his colleague. Something is very, very wrong. Usually nothing like this happens at Crater Lake National Park. His mind starts racing as fast as the Jeep he's driving, a brain entering survival mode, trying to predict every possible danger. A forest fire? It was still daylight. He'd have seen the smoke. An animal attack? Maybe. Bears could sometimes be seen roaming about on the fringes of the park, but they typically kept away from humans, especially the more people were around. And today, in the midst of July, there were plenty to ward off any strays. Every attempted prediction only raised the same question. Just what the hell was going on? Approaching the tree line, one of the other rangers waves down the car. She's armed. If the vagueness of the report hadn't been troubling enough, seeing another park ranger with a shotgun in her hands certainly was. They were in bear territory. It wasn't unheard of for one of them to occasionally need a gun to ward the bears off, but that was a rarity out at Crater Lake. Slamming the brakes and leaping out of the Jeep, the park ranger rushes towards his colleague as she takes cover behind a nearby tree. He immediately asks her what the situation is, but she urges him to be quiet. There's something out there with them, she tells him in a whisper, racking a live round into her shotgun. When the park ranger asks what, the other ranger shoots him a look. Her eyes say it all. She's terrified and confused. This isn't just a wild animal on a rampage or frightenedly defending its territory and cubs. She has no idea what it is. She can't even believe she's seen it, let alone start describing it. Twigs snap under the foot of something, causing the other ranger to raise her shotgun, leaning out from behind the tree in the direction of the noise. She scans the space a few feet beyond the barrel. Nothing. The park ranger takes a look for himself, not exactly eager to see what it is, but unable to fend off his own curiosity. He spots something, nothing more than a shape passing between the trees, almost mistaking it for a branch simply moving in the gentle breeze. He taps on the other ranger's shoulder and alerts her. Whatever it is, it's close, and it seems to be walking like a man. The other ranger looks. In a second, she raises her shotgun and fires. A blast of buckshot erupts from the barrel, causing a deafening, high-pitched ringing in the park ranger's ears. He doubles over, clutching his ears as the sound becomes physically painful, not realizing his colleague fumbling as she grabs a fresh cartridge, or the thing staggering towards them. That is, until he looks up, the moment his hearing returns. But before we go any further, I have a question for you. Does something feel wrong with you? Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, and this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/DrBob. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/DrBob. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Now back to the bizarre creature in the forest. It's like part of the forest has come to life and assumed the shape of a human being in order to attack them. Roots cover its body, sealing up the space where its eyes would be. Oregon-beaked moss coats its arms and hangs off it like it's been draped in a sheet of yellowy-green plants. The creature is horrible to look at, and yet it looks lost. It stumbles, arms outstretched like it's trying to blindly feel its way around, and the park ranger realizes it can't see. Another cartridge clicks into the shotgun tube, pulled back the chamber by the slide of the pump, and the other ranger raises the weapon, steadying her aim so as not to miss this time. Her sights line up, the mossy monstrosity sitting in the center, and her fingers squeezes on the trigger. An unexpected force from below pushes the barrel of the shotgun upwards, pointing it towards the treetops. Another ear-splitting blast rings out, sending nearby birds flying from their nests in panic. The park ranger keeps the weapon pointed up, despite his colleague's protests to let go of her gun, or the drops of blood dripping out and trailing down his neck from his own eardrums. He glances over his shoulder as, whatever it is, flees in terror. Startled by the shotgun blast, it runs away between the trees, knocking into some as it moves with uncertainty. Minutes later, a team of other rangers arrives, declaring that they're taking over the search effort for the creature that was found lurking around Crater Lake National Park. These rangers seem off. They look the part, in full uniforms and everything, but the park ranger can't place their faces. They somehow seem brand new, yet not one of them is fazed by the unusual situation. They seemed all the more interested in questioning all the hikers and families visiting the park who had seen the creature, as they were in actually finding it. It was almost as if they didn't want the word getting out. The park ranger decides he can't keep quiet any longer and raises a concern to the newcomers. He tells them that he doesn't think whatever is out there is some kind of monster. He thinks it's human. The new rangers thank him for his input, but insist that they'll take it from here. Little did he know, these weren't other park rangers. They were agents of the SCP Foundation. They have been embedded within the National Park's Rangers to contain SCP-371, an anomalous log floating in Crater Lake, said to contain a powerful deity named Yao, who can cause dangerous weather to erupt unless the log is left to float freely. Then the call comes in from SCP Foundation Command, reports of an entity attacking civilians. Since they happen to be nearby, in the same park no less, a handful of agents are sent in to investigate and, if possible, contain the creature. Before too long, the civilian witnesses, even the real park rangers who had tried to kill the entity, have all been interviewed, administered with memory-wiping amnestics, and subsequently released, as if nothing out of the ordinary has even happened. Putting boots to the ground, the search for the unidentified creature doesn't last long. Within 2 hours, the agents have found what they're looking for. Only, it's not a creature. It's a person. His name is Zach Herman. They find him cowering under an alcove near the edge of the lake, his moss-covered skin providing a near-perfect camouflage for him to blend in with his woodland surroundings. The only thing that gives him away is the sound of his frightened sobs. The Foundation agents aren't under orders to neutralize him on sight. Instead, they humanely subdue Zach Herman and arrange to have him taken to a nearby Foundation outpost for examination. SCP-3462, an anomalous humanoid entity known to inhabit a rundown Blockbuster video rental store in the nearby town of Bend, Oregon, with the area having been sealed off and constantly patrolled by Foundation personnel. So that seems like the best place to take Zach and figure out exactly what happened to him. Upon closer examination at the Foundation outpost, it's discovered that Zach Herman has a number of unidentified roots growing through both his skin and internal organs. Given the danger to his life that this poses, he's rushed into an operating theater to undergo emergency surgery. 18 hours pass as the Foundation tries to save the man's life. At this time, the surgeons decide that it isn't wise or possible to remove all the roots at once, so instead, they focus on clearing the ones that had grown within and over his eyes, nostrils, ear canals, and throat. Another 7 hours of intensive surgery pass, and Zach Herman is still alive. He's not cured, but the roots covering much of his face have at least been cleared. After stabilizing, it's then that he's transferred to Site 56, where the Foundation intends to conduct further operations to remove the growths from his body, as well as ask Zach questions about what happened to him. They're still baffled as to what caused his anomalous mutation into a moss monster. Just where had these roots come from? And what exactly was SCP-7185? Researcher Charlie Canley is tasked with conducting interviews with the subject, Zach Herman, between his various procedures, and she wastes no time in unearthing his story. Oak Ridge, Oregon, 60 miles north of Crater Lake National Park, where Zach will eventually be found. That's where he describes the horrific mutation taking place. Given that the roots would grow over his eyes, his vision impaired, he has no idea where he's going until he eventually winds up in Crater Lake. Scared, alone, and changed beyond recognition. And as he describes it, he wasn't the only one. Shortly before his own mutation, Zach mentions witnessing the same happening to Kellen Herman, his husband. The couple, along with a group of several others, are in a small Oregon town reached by traveling to Hills Creek Lake, then following Hills Creek Road south until finding a road sign simply labeled Beard. The place has spent 70 years in ruins, abandoned, and left to be overtaken by the elements. Most of the roads leading into the area are blocked off thanks to a landslide, leaving the town completely void of all human life. Until Zach and his friends arrive in Beard. There are 6 of them in total, including Zach, his husband Kellen, then Azrael, Mark, Angel, and Caleb. Answering an ad on Craigslist, the group has come to Beard after being hired by a man named Sean to scavenge through the abandoned town, collecting anything that could potentially be of value. Scrap metal and intact valuables, as long as they can be resold, are worth holding on to. While the group searches, Sean delivers food and supplies to them once per month. One thing that they hope for each time, but never seem to get, is something to drink in their downtime. So on a whim, while exploring an abandoned factory they come across, Zach looks for an alternative source of beer for the group to enjoy. What he finds is an unusual blue machine. Pulling levers on it, he finds that it dispenses samples of a surprisingly green liquid. Of course, none of the group immediately drinks it. Not until Angel finds an old journal with entries dating back to the 1930s. It describes the owners of the factory giving the liquid to their workers and only ceasing the practice after the workers stopped getting drunk. Taking that to mean the liquid was safe to drink, the group decided to each take a swig of the green. Initially, none of them feel any change. It's actually rather anticlimactic, at least at first. Soon after, however, they start to feel energized, more alert, and awake for much longer without feeling the usually expected fatigue that would bring. It even helps them search through parts of the town quicker, something they're all grateful for. After a week, not one of them even feels the need to sleep. They were even healing from injuries faster, small cuts were sealing in minutes, bruises clearing entirely almost as quickly as they formed. After about a month, the negative side effects start. They start manifesting as small symptoms, the group experiencing various bodily aches that gradually become far, far worse. It affects each of them differently, too. Zach starts to experience a tightness in his chest, while Caleb develops a bad fever that leaves him barely able to function. Mark and Angel's hair starts falling out in thick clumps too. Soon after, the same is happening to Caleb. His symptoms are the first to worsen. After his hair falls out, his skin starts to do the same. It keeps peeling away, turning red. Then, Sean arrives in Beard. According to the information given by Zach in his interviews with the Foundation, their employer would routinely drive to the town every 3 months in order to pick up anything valuable the group has recovered. All of them suffering from the ill effects of whatever the liquid they'd all drank was. Those of the group that still had the strength to stand rushed to meet Sean and beg him to get them help. Upon taking one look at them, he drives away, abandoning them. 4 days after Sean left them there, the sleepless group is startled by screaming in the night. It's Caleb, and he's on fire. Panicking, the others try to help, pouring water on him to douse the flames. It seems to work, but it's only a few minutes before the fire starts up again. They even try taking him to the creek that runs through the town, but submerging Caleb in the water only causes his skin to form massive blisters that painfully burst. Keeping him under didn't work either. He kept needing to come up for air, and breaking the surface, he started catching fire again the second he was above water. There was nothing they could do to save him. He just kept burning. Caleb is the first of the group to die. It's not clear when this occurred. Investigating the area, the Foundation recovers fragmented journal entries written by Azrael, in which the others all attribute Caleb's death to him having a weak immune system. But normally, diseases don't cause people to spontaneously catch fire. By the morning, he is almost completely burned, leaving only a charred corpse that the group buries by the factory. Following Caleb's death, Zach is forced to leave. The others blame him for Caleb's death, and he does as well. He intends to find some other way of getting help for the rest of the group. Kellen joins him, and the couple leave Beard together. Meanwhile, Angel, Mark, and Azrael search for their own way out of the town, but to no avail. Hardly any of the roads are accessible on foot, and those that are just lead to abandoned properties on the woodland outskirts of Beard. According to Azrael's journal entry, they then refocused their efforts towards finding a cure for whatever it was they had drunk. It's not much more successful. During Zach and Kellen's absence, Mark is the next group member whose symptoms start to get worse. His hair was almost entirely gone, and soon, rashes started to form over his skin before peeling away. Immediately, he and the other two start to fear that what happened to Caleb might be about to happen to Mark too. Their only plan is for Mark to stay out in the snow if he starts catching fire in the same way, since, by this point, winter had reached Oregon. But instead of a reoccurrence of Caleb's condition, Mark's skin begins repeatedly forming an unusual bluish-green substance, warm to the touch. It accumulates every few hours, and Angel and Azrael help him scrape it off before it ultimately returns. Within days, it's returning faster, too fast for them to clear it. So much of it forms that it starts dripping off Mark. Then Angel points out it seems to be candle wax, and the more of it, the hotter it gets. Shortly after, the substance burns out Mark's eyes. He's completely covered in scalding hot wax, with no way of removing it entirely. Eventually, he dies. Angel and Azrael can't move his body thanks to the wax, as more of it keeps forming, nor can they bury him yet thanks to a snowstorm outside. It's only a week later that Azrael thinks he sees the body moving. Mark is still alive. He's been lying in a pile of hot wax the entire time, his body still making more. Soon, he stops moving altogether. While all this is happening, Kellen and Zach are still trying to find help, but manage to wind up lost in the woods surrounding Beard. The numerous overlapping and confusing paths surrounding the town had meant one wrong turn sends both of them heading towards the woods, with only a few cans of food, a lighter, and a pocket knife between them. After a week, they pass a mountain that Zach assumes is the Diamond Peak volcano. Another week later, both he and Kellen are beginning to suffer their own severe symptoms from the liquid they consumed. Kellen is vomiting shards of metal and glass. Further metallic chunks were breaking through Kellen's skin as they grew within his body. At the same time, roots grow over Zach's eyes, preventing him from fully seeing just what is happening to his husband. They sit together in Kellen's dying moments, Zach feeling like he needs to be there for his partner, even though he can't see him or do anything to help him. A few hours after Kellen's breathing eventually stops, Zach walks through the woods until he hears the sound of cars. only to be found in Crater Lake National Park. Around the same time, Angel also dies. It takes him a whole week after his eyelids and fingernails fall out, followed by every layer of his skin. It would happen multiple times, thanks to the effects of the green liquid causing him to recover. Also, his skin could once again come off. At one point, Azrael, horrified by it all, sees his friend's face fall off. Still unable to find a way out of Beard, one of the remaining 2 survivors of the group also starts to change. Bumps form under Azrael's skin, eventually causing his hands to become swollen and preventing him from moving anything below his chest. Aware of his impending fate, he stashes the journal he's been writing in inside a backpack and leaves it for whoever finds them. The Foundation is able to recover the bodies of Azrael, Angel, Mark, and the buried remains of Caleb within Beard, but they decline to share this information with Zach. Sean's identity is confirmed to be that of Sean McDougal, and Foundation agents are sent to interrogate him. They aren't able to ascertain any valuable information from him, so instead amnesticize him. Anything saved on Sean's devices relating to the location of the town of Beard, the group he hired to scavenge there, and the $46,000 he'd made from the scavenged goods are all seized. SCP-7185 consists of 2 elements. The first is an unidentified machine that was uncovered by Zach Herman and his friends in an abandoned factory in the southern Cascadian mountain range of Oregon. Despite not having any power sources connected to it, SCP-7185 seemingly functions without the need for electricity. It is instead operated via a series of levers connected to the main body of the device. 2 are black and 1 is rusted over. Should both of the black levers be switched downwards and the rusty lever pulled, the machine will produce the second element of this anomaly, designated by the Foundation as SCP-7185-1, hereby alternatively known as the body horror juice. The alcoholic liquid byproduct of activating SCP-7185 is green in color and has a semi-viscous consistency. If this liquid is drunk at any point by a human being, then this person will undergo major bodily changes that tend to span a period of at least several weeks. Anyone ingesting SCP-7185-1 will suffer numerous mutations and deformations of their body, although exactly how they are altered varies depending on the person drinking the juice. SCP-7185-1 also negates the effects of any depressants, opiates, or other stimulants taken after ingestion, meaning there is no way to nullify the pain of these intense physical changes. On July 21, 2014, Zach Herman died due to complications during surgery. The Foundation surgeons had been making extensive efforts to clear the roots growing throughout his body as a result of Herman ingesting SCP-7185. They had made enough of a difference to allow him to participate in interviews with researcher Canley. However, during these exchanges, Zach mentions that he can still feel everything that is happening to him during the procedures. Every incision, every removal, every stitch. The same day, the body of Zach's husband, Kellen Herman, is also recovered.
A haunted house. It seems like a fun idea for a date, although the model is the type to jump at everything. He knows everyone in the fake blood and clown makeup are just out-of-work actors or students looking to make some easy money, but any loud screams are enough to get him leaping out of his own skin. Then again, he expects that's part of his date's plan. Get him scared so he seeks shelter in his arms. It's quite sweet, actually. So he agrees. The place is hardly the stuff of nightmares. In fact, it's all pretty homesprung, and being there with company makes it easier to giggle at all the half-baked attempts to incite scares. The distinctly ketchup-scented blood stains are a particular highlight that leaves the model and his date in stitches. Then they spot a hall of mirrors and can't resist heading inside. It's even cheaper than they're expecting. Multiple standing mirrors that seem to have been taken straight out of people's homes and set up in an easy-to-navigate maze. Still, it ends up being fun for the most part, until the model spots something in his reflection in one of the mirrors. A tiny blemish. That wasn't there yesterday, and he's certain of it. His whole job is centered around how he looks, but he tries to brush it off. After all, even he gets insecure about his appearance from time to time. It happens to everyone. But in the next mirror, it seems to look even worse. Maybe it's the lighting, he thinks. Then he starts to worry. Has his date noticed? It plays on his mind, and the rest of the way through the hall of mirrors, he avoids looking at his reflection. A few days later, and he's sitting in the makeup chair, getting ready for a photo shoot.
He doesn't dare open his eyes, trusting the makeup artists to cover up the things he's been seeing on his face every time he looks in the mirror. He's tried to cancel the shoot, calling his manager and telling her that he just can't be on camera right now. But she comes racing over to his apartment to get a look at him for herself and tells him she can't see anything wrong, to just get over himself and not be a diva. He tries to settle into the familiarity of the photo shoot. The outfit changes, the rapid flashing of the cameras, while he tries desperately not to let his concern show on his face. A few times it slips out, the cameraman telling him to look less worried. It's hard to be, especially with how he thinks he must look. Seeing the photos afterwards, it's even worse than he thought. It barely looks like him. The person in the pictures is unrecognizable to the model. He argues with the cameraman and manager, telling them they need to Photoshop the images. Neither of them can see what's wrong with them. A few more days pass, and the model is cowering in his apartment. The thing he sees in the mirror doesn't look like him anymore. He doesn't even look human. He's seen it everywhere. Looking back at him in the glass pane of windows, out of the corner of his eye in the TV, shuffling in the place where his own reflection should be. It creeps into every photo, takes his place, standing in the spots he's supposed to be. The model's even started having nightmares about seeing whatever he's become. There's something very wrong with all this, and it all started in that hall of mirrors. Held in a secure storage locker at Site-19, SCP-4682 is to remain wrapped in an opaque material at all times, in accordance with its special containment procedures. Under no circumstances are any personnel permitted to view SCP-4682 directly. If they do, then they likely won't like what they see. SCP-4682 is, or at least appears to be, a common silver and glass mirror. Upon closer inspection, there appears to be nothing immediately or obviously anomalous about the mirror, even down to having been constructed with entirely ordinary materials. The anomalous properties of SCP-4682 will only manifest from the point a person observes their own reflection within the mirror itself, after which point, any individual that is subjected to the effects of SCP-4682 must avoid any and all reflective surfaces effective immediately after looking at SCP-4682. An affected individual will be advised by the Foundation to avoid being depicted in any and all visual mediums, including never having their picture taken or allowing themselves to be recorded on video, either through the use of digital or film cameras. Psychologists working for the firm Schuyler and Crane Psychiatry, a front for the SCP Foundation's Psychological Research and Analysis Department, will conduct therapy sessions with affected individuals on a monthly to weekly schedule, determined on a case-by-case basis, depending on the severity of the side effects they experience after looking directly at SCP-4682. This, of course, leaves the lingering question of what exactly happens when a person observes their reflection in SCP-4682. Do they find themselves trapped in an inescapable mirror dimension? Does it impart an anomalous effect that removes them from photographs, leading them to question their own sanity and existence? Not quite, but it's arguably just as cruel. Any human being that observes their own reflection on SCP-4682's surface will experience a permanent and irreversible shift in their perception. Whenever viewing themselves in SCP-4682, they will immediately notice physical differences that are not actually present on their real face or body, but they only appear in the anomalous mirror. These have been known to include a mix of the following discrepancies in reflections. For one, they might perceive themselves as having incorrect proportions of the face, such as their eyes being further apart or closer together than they are in reality. This can also extend to the proportions of the rest of their body too, as the reflection might depict them as being inaccurately taller or shorter than they actually are, or show them having a significantly different body mass or shape. Many of the D-Class test subjects deployed during experimentation with SCP-4682 have also reported seeing various blemishes and skin conditions on the mirror's inaccurate reflections, from acne to facial scars, eczema to even conditions as severe as first-degree burns, all of which are not present on the test subjects' actual faces. Dental hygiene of the test subjects is often depicted as being much worse in their SCP-4682 reflection than it is in real life, with yellowed or rotting teeth appearing, as well as cavities that do not correspond with the subject's actual dental records.
Reflected in SCP-4682 are also often the addition of facial features that are considered, at least by conventional standards, to be unattractive. Some test subjects have reported seeing themselves sporting unibrows or uneven facial hair regardless of gender. The same also further extends to the rest of their body, with numerous instances of D-Class seeing themselves with excessive body hair that isn't present outside of the reflection. Following a person's direct exposure to the mirror's surface, the effect of SCP-4682 will become unavoidable. While not possible for anyone else to observe any noticeable change in said person, they themselves will notice the perceived imperfections in their appearance and other reflective surfaces. This extends not only to conventional non-anomalous mirrors, but also to television, computer, or cell phone screens, windows, and other glass surfaces, as well as anything that is polished sufficiently enough to produce a reflection. Additionally, these inaccurate anomalous differences to an affected person's appearance will be present in any photographs or video footage of them, meaning that there is virtually no proven way to convince them that these imperfections are actually present beyond pointing this out. The differences to a person's appearance are not present when they are viewed by others, or when they view themselves with the naked eye. However, naturally, it will be impossible for them to view their own face without the assistance of a reflective surface, which will always depict them as having inaccurate imperfections that are not actually physically present. As if triggering this perceptual shift wasn't bad enough, SCP-4682's anomalous effect is also cumulative, as in, it only gets worse every time a person sees themselves again. When viewing their reflection after exposure to SCP-4682, whether using the anomalous mirror, a normal one, or any other method, another new imperfection will seemingly have appeared. Any reflective surface or method of visual recording around them will appear to make more and more differences present in their appearance. Anyone around that observes the altered reflection of the affected person, particularly on a surface or through photographs, will also be able to view the same imperfections that they perceive. However, they will be aware that these are not actually present when they view the person directly. There is currently no known way to circumvent or cure the perceptual anomaly caused by SCP-4682 or negate the lasting effect of it. Even the administering of memory-altering amnestics have no effect, as even if an affected subject forgets what they originally saw in SCP-4682, or even forgets the moment they looked into it to begin with, in some cases, using amnestics to treat exposure to SCP-4682's anomalous perceptual alteration can irreparably affect a person's view of themselves. One member of D-Class that was given amnestics after viewing SCP-4682 began believing the imperfections they saw in their reflection had always been part of their natural appearance. For a time, this led to a degree of acceptance in this individual. Being unable to recall their encounter with SCP-4682 meant they had no inclination that their reflection had previously appeared any differently before being altered by the mirror. However, they began to notice additional inaccuracies when subsequently viewing their reflection in the mirror above the faucet within their living quarters at the Foundation. The cumulative nature of SCP-4682 perceptual anomaly gradually led to this affected D-Class developing outlandish theories about their own identity. One such train of thought revolved around the belief that the Foundation had replaced their real self with some kind of clone, believing themselves to be a replica of the original, inaccurately mimicking their appearance and possessing all their memories. After being dissuaded of this belief by Foundation psychiatrists, the affected D-Class later adopted a new theory that the Foundation had been intentionally applying sophisticated visual effects makeup and prosthetics to his face and body each day until he noticed. When they raised this theory with his fellow D-Class personnel, many dismissed it, saying that they looked no different from when they'd first arrived in Foundation custody. This then led to a growing mistrust of other members of D-Class. The affected subject believing that those around them were secretly privy to the continuing changes they noticed in their reflection, and had been instructed to lie by the Foundation. Gradually, the SCP-4682 affected D-Class developed an uncontrollable paranoia towards all Foundation staff. Unbeknownst to anyone else at Site-19, they began to believe the SCP Foundation had intentionally stolen their face and was deliberately changing their appearance every day as some means of sadistic, psychological torture. At one point, the fact that this had been the side effect of looking at an anomalous mirror was revealed by their appointed psychologist, but this explanation was rejected by the D-Class as being nothing more than an attempt by the Foundation to mislead them. Having been drawing up an escape plan in secret, the affected individual eventually experienced a psychotic break and shattered the mirror in their holding cell, both to prevent them from being able to observe the continuously worsening changes in their reflection, and in order to hide one of the sharper fragments of glass on their person, in order to use it as a makeshift weapon. During recreational time, the D-Class caught a member of Foundation security by surprise and took them hostage, threatening their safety with the shard of the mirror. Holding it to the throat of their hostage, the D-Class was still able to catch momentary glimpses of their altered reflection in the glass. Additional Foundation security officers attempted to intervene, but could not get close enough to the D-Class without risking potential harm to their captured colleague. When asked by officers attempting to peacefully negotiate, the SCP-4682 affected D-Class made continuous requests for the Foundation to return their real face. Further attempts were made to explain the effects of SCP-4682 to the D-Class. However, they once again refused to believe what they were being told. Growing more and more agitated, witnesses state that the affected individual caught another glimpse of themselves reflected in one of the facility's tinted windows. Upon seeing further alterations to their reflection, they became enraged and released their hostage before attempting something drastic with the mirror shard to get rid of this false face. They were subsequently transferred to the medical wing of Site-19, where they remained alive but unconscious for several weeks. As a form of compensation for the mental anguish imposed on them by being made to look at SCP-4682 and then being forced to forget about it, the Foundation offered to perform facial reconstruction surgery on the affected D-Class, as well as applying skin grafts to repair some of the lasting facial trauma. However, the D-Class instead refused, opting to keep their face wrapped in bandages and sterile wound dressing indefinitely, requesting that the Foundation instead develop some method of preventing them from ever seeing their reflection again. At present, there are several proposals to re-engineer the technology behind the scramble goggles to serve this purpose. One includes developing electronic contact lenses that either blur or completely remove an individual's reflection from their vision in real time. However, these proposals are still awaiting review and approval by Foundation higher-ups. A number of other D-Class personnel used during testing of the anomalous mirror have reported suffering major psychological difficulty after witnessing their altered reflections. In particular, those who have seen the cumulative effects of multiple imperfections being added thanks to SCP-4682. Many report being unable to recall what they originally looked like before seeing the inaccurate changes in their reflections, with some even developing severe depression, anxiety, and insecurity connected to their appearance. In addition to this, there have been numerous documented cases of test subjects suffering from severe body dysmorphia following testing with the object. Given that this is one of the more common outcomes that can be caused by looking at SCP-4682, and in order to discourage personnel from doing so, the anomalous mirror is often widely referred to simply as the body dysmorphia mirror. The Foundation first encountered the mirror while investigating a missing persons case in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. A civilian, referred to simply as Rob, had reported to police that his boyfriend had been out of contact for a concerning amount of time, and an investigation into his whereabouts was subsequently launched. While this would typically be solely the concern of local law enforcement, a member of an SCP Foundation mobile task force happened to be operating undercover within the area's police force. This agent belonged to MTF Iota-10. Members of this task force do not strictly operate as a cohesive unit, but are instead a number of undercover operatives spread out across various international, federal, and local law enforcement agencies. This includes the Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Ministry of Intelligence, and various police departments. The primary goal of this mobile task force is transferring potentially anomalous evidence recovered during investigations into Foundation hands, as well as reporting any anomalies discovered in connection to criminal acts to the SCP Foundation. From there, they then allow Foundation response or containment teams to step in and take over jurisdiction of these cases from local law enforcement or federal agencies. This has led to MTF Iota-10 being more colloquially known by their nickname, the Damn Feds. One of these damn feds within the local Oklahoma Police Department investigating the disappearance of Rob's missing boyfriend was present when they searched his apartment. Immediately, this embedded Foundation operative noticed something was wrong. All of the mirrors, screens, windows, every reflective surface in the apartment seemed to have been shattered or painted over, except for one, SCP-4682, which was laying intact on the carpet of the bedroom. Even worse, the cause of the boyfriend's disappearance quickly became apparent upon the discovery of a mixture of Jack Daniels and cough medicine next to a body with a note.
Believing the apartment to have been the site of a potential anomalous incursion, the undercover MTF Iota-10 operative contacted his superiors at the SCP Foundation and requested that members of Mobile Task Force Eta-10 be dispatched to assess the situation. The operative was commended for making an accurate assessment of the situation, especially in requesting MTF Eta-10, otherwise known as See No Evil. Of all the Foundation's numerous deployable task forces, Eta-10 specializes in the investigation, acquisition, and containment of anomalies that cause visual cognition hazards or mimetic effects. In short, anything that cannot or should not be directly observed in order to be safely handled. Through the use of anomalous means available to only MTF Eta-10, they were able to safely secure SCP-4682 and bring it to Foundation containment. Also recovered from the scene in the apartment was the note left by Rob's boyfriend. This note revealed little about how he had come to have SCP-4682 in his possession, nor shed any light on its origins, or when he first began to notice its anomalous effects. However, it did contain insights as to how the mirror functioned through the harrowing testimony of the man who had been found dead alongside it. He had reportedly started seeing his altered reflection more frequently, so much so that it had started affecting his day-to-day life. He recalled accidentally colliding with his neighbor's car after he hadn't been using his vehicle's rearview mirror because he couldn't stand the sight of his own eyes looking back at him. It had seemingly become so bad that he had smashed the bathroom mirror in his apartment, unable to look into it for more than a second. However, still being able to see himself in the broken fragments, he tried throwing them away, only to still catch his inaccurate reflection on the metallic surface of his dishwasher. Every time a reflective surface showed imperfections on his face thanks to SCP-4682, he destroyed it, smashing his phone when he saw his reflection in the glass screen protector. According to his note, he even took a hammer to a hand mirror that Rob had given him as a gift, destroying it so thoroughly that there were only tiny shards and splinters of glass left. And he could still see himself in those, too. Desperation had long since set in, and he was considering somehow inducing blindness in himself, before eventually deciding that there was only one way to be rid of the sight of his own face for good. He had been seeing himself with crooked teeth and chewed fingernails, and had started to believe that Rob's feelings had enabled him to look at his boyfriend with rose-tinted glasses. He felt unworthy of his partner's love, and felt that Rob deserved better, unaware that the imperfections he was seeing in himself weren't really there, and had only appeared as a result of looking into SCP-4682. This tragic outcome of the effects of the body dysmorphia mirror are a large part of the reason that the SCP Foundation have long since discontinued testing with it, opting to keep it in storage where it can no longer hurt the way people look at themselves.
It's Saturday night, and a teenaged boy and girl are out on a date. They are strolling through a shopping mall with plans to see a movie later at the theater attached to the mall. As they walk through the mall waiting for their show to start, the girl spots something. It's a photo booth. She excitedly grabs the boy's hand and pulls him inside. They close the curtain, insert a coin, and the machine comes to life, snapping a series of photos. The two exit the booth, but both seem to be a little off. It's getting close to showtime, though, so they start making their way to the movie theater. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the mall patrons, something is happening deep below the ground. The boy and girl exit the theater and walk arm in arm through the alley back toward the parking lot where the boy left his car. It's late now. The sun has long since set, and they're all alone. But they don't hear the footsteps behind them, or sense the pair of bodies that are following them, getting closer and closer. They get to the car. It's the only one left in the parking lot, and the boy takes out his keys to unlock the car when he fumbles and drops them to the ground. As he bends over to pick them up, he finally sees who has been following them. It's them, a pair of doppelgangers coming straight towards them. They look exactly like the boy and girl, except for their faces, which are horribly distorted, with strange lumps and no eyes or mouths. They look as though they were a drawing of a face that was somehow smudged out. The boy quickly gets the keys and grabs the girl, dragging her away from the creatures, who are now reaching for the boy and girl, grasping and clawing at their faces as they try to moan through their skin-covered mouths. He gets the car unlocked, and both manage to get inside. As the creatures bang on the windows, the boy starts the engine and drives away, leaving the abominations behind. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-715, also known as My Face That I May Be. SCP-715 is a take-your-own-photo brand photo booth, a product of the Sony Corporation made in the 1970s. This is a standard-looking photo booth, bearing a close resemblance to the many thousands of others that were in operation around the world at the time, with no anomalous visual characteristics at all. The only detail setting this machine apart from its countless brethren is a small metal tag which has been added to the back of the machine at some point, but a significant amount of wear has made it impossible to read what, if anything, was ever stamped on the tag. SCP-715's basic operation is also not anomalous in appearance. It will only activate if an individual sits inside and inserts the required coinage, at which point it will take a series of photos, just like a normal photo booth. The photos will also appear normal, though often some will be heavily distorted and obscure the subject's face in various ways. What truly sets this photo booth apart, however, is what happens outside of the booth when the pictures are taken. While the individuals who had their photos taken, classified as SCP-715-B instances, are able to exit the booth with no obvious effects, below them all, deep underground, something truly terrifying takes place. Underneath the mall is Site-81715, an extra-dimensional space which is accessible through a mall maintenance service door located in Sub-Basement 3, a door that does not appear on any of the mall's structural blueprints or in other records. The site consists of a giant cavernous room, which appears to have been hewn right out of the surrounding limestone. In the middle of the room is its most distinguishing feature, a large, deep pit. The walls of the pit are made of an unidentified substance, though it appears similar in both appearance and composition to human fat tissue. These fleshy walls secrete a powerful, corrosive substance, which makes examination and exploration of the pit particularly dangerous. When SCP-715 is activated in the mall above, a humanoid creature, classified as SCP-715-A, will appear in this pit. The bodies of these creatures are similar in appearance to the individuals who had their picture taken inside of 715, but their faces are radically different. Each has severe facial disfigurements and abnormalities, such as large growths, deep lacerations, and the absence of facial features. After appearing in the pit, these SCP-715-A instances will attempt to scale the fleshy walls of the pit and leave Site-81715. These instances are considered hostile, and Foundation security personnel are authorized to neutralize the creatures by any means necessary. Further research into how the SCP-715-A entities are formed and what exactly the pit is are ongoing, and it's not currently known how many 715-A instances exist down in the pit. With the entities who were able to climb out of the pit able to be relatively easily neutralized by security forces, SCP-715 was originally classified as safe. It was contained at its point of origin within the mall in Ohio, and Foundation personnel posing as mall employees would collect the photos printed by the machine. However, following additional discoveries, this classification necessitated changing. The Foundation began noticing inconsistencies with SCP-715-B entities after a researcher tested SCP-715 himself by sitting inside and having his photo taken. Soon after, he began acting in ways that were considered strange, such as when he turned down a promotion to a prominent position with better pay and perks for seemingly no reason, and when he skipped a mandatory site inspection for reality-bending anomalies. After noticing these strange behaviors, a Foundation research head had an anomalous optical enhancement device placed in the oddly acting researcher's bedroom and learned a surprising truth about the SCP-715-A and B entities. The Foundation had been killing the wrong ones. The device, which could remove anomalous reality-distorting effects from images, showed that the researcher was actually one of the creatures from the pit, with the telltale facial distortions. Following this shocking revelation, the research head used the same device on the creatures still inside the pit underneath the mall. They found that when the anomalous visual effects were removed from the distorted creatures who were trying to get out of the fleshy pit, that they were actually normal-looking humans. These SCP-715-A entities were the human beings who had entered the photo booth had their pictures taken, and were somehow transported to the pit. They had been trying to escape their prison and tell the Foundation who they really were, but this only resulted in them being terminated by the on-site security forces. In order to fix this mistake, SCP-715 was hastily reclassified as Keter, and SCP-715 was removed from the mall in order to be stored in a secure locker at Site-19. Research personnel were no longer able to access SCP-715 without special authorization, and study of the interior was limited to what could be done via remote drone use only. The Foundation began rounding up all known instances of SCP-715-B, who were now the ones subjected to immediate termination. Foundation staff did manage to interview one 715-B instance, though, who had been previously believed to be a fellow Foundation researcher. It is unknown exactly what the researcher doppelganger said in that interview, but it must have been extremely serious, as the end result was another complete change in protocol. All attempts to contain and neutralize instances of SCP-715-B would immediately cease, since if there were as many out in the world as the doppelganger claimed, then ultimately, it would better maintain normalcy and ensure the secrecy of SCP-715 if they were allowed to go free. Sadly, the same was not the case for the SCP-715-A instances that still existed down in the pit. The researcher doppelganger advised that it would be unwise to remove them from the pit, and the current Foundation policy is that down in the pit is where they will remain. Following this interview, SCP-715 was reclassified once again as safe. The photo booth was also moved again, this time to a maximum security storage locker at Site-81, and Foundation personnel have been prohibited from interacting with SCP-715-B instances at all. However, there is one more piece of information about SCP-715, and it is only accessible to those with proper security clearance. Another Foundation agent was found to actually be an instance of SCP-715-B and taken into custody for observation. While under surveillance, it was discovered that this instance, classified as SCP-715-B7, was emitting low-level radiation that was somehow directed at Site-81-715, the location of the pit. During an autopsy of the creature, it was found that the radioactive emissions were actually increasing in output and frequency, and soon after, a power outage and containment breach occurred at the site where the autopsy took place. Following these events, the body of SCP-715-B7 disappeared, and video surveillance confirmed that several members of Foundation staff were responsible, all of whom had been involved in SCP-715 research. The staff members escaped with the body and left no other evidence behind, save for a single photo with the ominous text, "My ears that I may hear, my eyes that I may see, my mouth that I may speak. Do not touch my face." No other information regarding SCP-715 has been found, and many questions remain. Just what are instances of 715-B, and what do they want? Are they some kind of hive mind colony that reproduces through the use of a mysterious photo booth? What happens to those left behind in the pit? And what will they do should they ever get out? A kindly-looking old woman is carrying groceries into her home. When she closes the door, a crack forms in the wall, and a tile slides down off her roof, crashing to the ground and shattering. The next day, the local builder seems confused. He just fixed a similar problem a week ago at another house, and another the week before that. He'll patch this crack just like he did before and repair the roof, but as he does so, he can't help but think he'll be at another house with the same problem soon. Old people are like this sometimes, though, breaking things on purpose to get someone to come visit them. Oh well, as long as the money is right, he'll keep doing the repairs. That evening, the old woman is in bed when she's woken up by something falling onto her face. A crack is opened in the ceiling right above her bed, and plaster is falling on her. What is happening to this house? She would have to call the builder again in the morning and let him know that it was getting worse. She gets up to clean the plaster dust off her face, but stops halfway to the door. Was that a noise she heard? It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. Another noise. She definitely heard something. Is someone in her home? "Hello?" she cries out. "Whoever you are, you better go. My husband is going to be home any moment, and he won't be happy."
The noises seemed to have stopped. Maybe she was imagining things. Who would rob a poor old woman, after all? She didn't have anything worth taking. She still needs to wash the plaster off her face, though. She listens for a moment, and when she doesn't hear anything else, she opens the bedroom door and screams. The next day, a child stands in front of the house with a look of shock. Was there an earthquake? How could a house end up like this? They ring the doorbell, but there's no answer. They knock on the door and are surprised to find that the door is open. "Grandma?" the child cries into the quiet house. No response. The child enters and looks around. The house is a mess. Chunks of plaster have fallen off the walls and ceiling. Shelves have fallen over, spilling their contents. And there's broken glass from shattered light bulbs everywhere. The boy looks up the stairs and can see that his grandmother's bedroom door is open and the light is on. "Grandma, are you up there?" Still no response. The child nervously starts up the stairs, gripping the railing tight. They quietly make their way to the bedroom and step into the sliver of light coming from the cracked door. The child pushes the door open to find their grandmother on the floor. Only, it isn't their grandmother. Whatever this is looks like their grandmother, but like she has been stretched and twisted, her body bent at angles where no joints exist. The child is paralyzed with fear, unable to do anything but stare. But the nightmare isn't over yet, because their grandmother is still alive. Sadly, reports like these are all too common in this small town that is plagued by attacks from SCP-373, also known as the Crooked Man. SCP-373 is an extremely dangerous anomalous creature that is currently plaguing the population of Tenby, a small rural village in Oxfordshire, England. Every 12 years during the fall and winter months, SCP-373 will engage in a period of hostile behavior that lasts for roughly 70 days, during which time it will target and attack people who are indoors and alone after sunset. Those targeted by SCP-373 will find that the building they are in rapidly deteriorates, causing damage and creating structural integrity issues. These often appear as cracks on the outside of the building that lead to the buildings taking on a crooked appearance. Unfortunately, while the SCP Foundation is aware of both the location and the periods within which SCP-373 operates, it has so far been unable to prevent any attacks. Additionally, the Foundation has yet to be able to produce either an image or even a physical description of SCP-373 due to the effect it has on recording equipment. Cameras set up to capture the anomaly produce only distorted or corrupted footage, leaving its appearance a mystery. Victims targeted by SCP-373 meet a fate that is, in many ways, worse than death. Their bodies will experience extreme deformations, as their bones suffer dozens of fractures and are stretched and twisted in various unnatural directions. They are then healed by the rapid generation of cartilage and the growth of extra skin to cover the new elongated limbs, leaving the victims a malformed knot of gnarled extremities. Some of the cases are quite severe, with one victim having just their forearm extended to over 2.4 meters, and another who was left stretched to 12.5 meters in height. Despite the gruesome injuries suffered, the majority of victims are still alive following the attacks, though they will more often than not be left completely paralyzed, in a persistent vegetative state, or both. 27 victims of SCP-373 are currently being held in a long-term care facility within a wing of a local hospital that was requisitioned by the Foundation specifically for the care and treatment of 783 victims. Like many of the anomalies that the SCP Foundation investigates and contains, many of the residents of Tenby appear to have some awareness of the Crooked Man, and the anomaly has become something of a local boogeyman. Researchers have even documented local school children singing a nursery rhyme that appears connected and may even explain the origins of the creature. It goes, "There lived a crooked man who made a crooked deal. He kept a crooked cane and his catch in crooked creel. He stole a crooked child who cried a crooked squeal, and that crooked little man was broken on the wheel." A month before a recent SCP-783 period of activity was to begin, a Class D personnel, D-209, was sent to live in a Foundation-owned home in the village. Audio and video recording equipment was set up throughout the house in case the D-Class was targeted, in the hopes that some information could be gleaned should something take place.
43 days after he began living in the house, something finally did. One evening while in bed reading a book, D209 heard noises on the ground floor of the home. Cameras on the first floor experienced corruption and showed only a distortion moving through the house. When D209 attempted to leave the bedroom and escape the home, they immediately encountered SCP-783. During a period of time that lasted roughly 5 hours, their bones were broken numerous times and reset over and over, leaving D209 a twisted mass of flesh and bone. Strangely, at the exact same time that D209 was being attacked, all 27 of the living prior SCP-783 victims in the hospital experienced violent seizures, despite most of them having been declared functionally brain dead and the rest being totally paralyzed. Also concurrent with the attack was a seismic event on the outskirts of town, and the details revealed by this event were both illuminating and extremely disturbing. Foundation personnel were dispatched to the site of the seismic activity to investigate and determine if it was connected to SCP-783 in any way. There, they found a small group of angry townspeople, perhaps frustrated by seemingly unending paranormal events in their town and the lack of progress that had been made to stop them. After a tense standoff, SCP Agent Collins fired her service weapon into the air, and the crowd quickly scattered. Now, free of distraction, the agents could begin their investigation in earnest. They immediately spotted several objects sticking out of the earth. Upon closer inspection, these were identified as elongated human toes. A dig team was sent to the site, and by the next day, a mass grave had been uncovered that was filled with the twisted mass of what appeared to be victims of SCP-783. Their mutated and drawn-out bodies were well preserved despite being buried directly in the ground, and had all been buried head down, with their arms extending deeper into the burial pit. As one researcher was attempting to take a tissue sample from one of the bodies, the ground beneath him gave way and he fell into the pit. He landed on the tangled mass of limbs which shifted under his weight, and he disappeared into the pit beneath them. Agent Collins immediately found a length of rope, tied it to her waist, and climbed into the pit with instructions to the on-site team to pull her back up when she signaled. Agent Collins descended into the pit beneath the bodies, and after several minutes, she was extracted, though without the missing researcher. At debriefing, she described how she found an anomalous location under the ground beneath 783's victims' corpses, and she was so rattled by what she saw that she was granted a temporary leave of absence. The Foundation had to know more, and a D-Class personnel was quickly selected for exploration of the underground anomaly. D2172 was equipped with audio and video recording equipment, along with several scientific measurement tools, as well as a firearm, and was lowered down into the pit via crane. Their wired tether to the surface would both send the information they collected back, as well as serve as their lifeline to the surface. As D2172 was lowered past the mass of corpses into the darkness, they experienced a sense of vertigo, before it was realized that the anomalous effects extended to gravity as well, which had become reversed, and that they would need to start climbing up in order to descend further into the pit. They soon climbed out of the hole surrounded by the reaching, extended arms of corpses, and emerged into an open world with an overcast sky. It looked exactly like the town of Tembe, with the same buildings present there as in our world. The world appeared to be uninhabited, though, with no sign of the missing SCP Foundation researcher. D2172 began investigating the buildings and found them all to be empty as well, though they did unfortunately find signs of a struggle in one house, with what looked to be evidence of the missing researcher's demise. They continued exploring the area and found that the anomalous properties of the location extended to its borders too. And as the D-Class walked north out of the town, after several kilometers, they found that they were now somehow back at the southern edge of the town. D2172 was ordered to return to the entry point, but as they walked, they were suddenly impeded by the deformed body of an SCP-783 victim that stretched across the road in front of them. D2172 drew and fired their weapon at the entity, but it didn't react, and they were forced to retreat into the nearby woods. After several minutes, they stopped to rest when they spotted something else. In the distance, the D-Class saw what looked to be a giant white birch tree, and it was coming towards them. As the living tree approached, it became clear that it wasn't a tree at all. What looked like branches were extended bony fingers that it was using to walk. The long, branch-like fingers were coming out of the top of the tree, where D-2172 could see their origin. These branches were the elongated fingers of the missing SCP Foundation researcher. D-2172 turned to run as the giant living tree chased them back into the town, firing their weapon at the creature whenever they had the chance, but was unable to stop it. The visual feed was soon lost as the audio continued to broadcast the screams of D-2172. But this wasn't the end of the expedition. The on-site team was surprised to witness after several hours that the tether was pulled on twice, the signal that it should be reeled in. A medical team was sent to the site, since it was assumed that D-2172 would need immediate care, and the team began reeling in the line. After several minutes, they spotted the harness that should have been strapped to D-2172, but with nothing in it. They continued to pull, but the harness became stuck on the mass of corpses in the pit. They then noticed that it wasn't actually stuck. There was a hand holding onto the harness for dear life. It was D-2172's hand. The team kept pulling as D-2172's arm kept stretching out of the pit to a length of over 3 meters. But eventually, the resistance became too much. D-2172 lost its grip, and it was seen sinking back into the mass of corpses inside the pit. Following this expedition, it was determined that only special operations teams and mobile task forces would be used to explore the dangerous anomalous location in the future. At least 3 such expeditions have been undertaken, though the details remain classified for the time being, and perhaps it is for the best if they remain so. The SCP Foundation will continue to monitor the town of Tembe in an attempt to learn more about SCP-783 and hopefully discover a means to contain it and its related phenomena. Due to the difficulty in containing the anomaly, it has been classified as Keter, and a local building adjacent to the Tembe Hospital has been requisitioned and designated as Provisional Site 5 in order to accommodate the increased Foundation presence. As the SCP Foundation continues to research this mysterious and highly dangerous anomaly, any victims of SCP-783 are to be retrieved, their injuries cataloged, and then their bodies are to be incinerated.
A perfect shot. The photographer holds up his camera, focusing on the deer. Then, the creature turns and stares down the photographer with the face of a human man. A long, elegant neck ending in a mutated abomination. The photographer drops the camera and runs away screaming. He won't be coming back to get it. He'd rather just buy a new one. A woman is walking her dog along the dirt road she's walked down every day for several years. It winds alongside a dense forest and past several large plots of land. Some are occupied by farms, some have been left abandoned. It's a pleasant walk, one she can always count on to be as quiet and peaceful as it is stimulating for her dog, with plenty to look at and smell. Occasionally, he gets distracted by a wild animal, but the odd squirrel or possum is nothing the dog hasn't seen before, and she can quickly get him back on the path with a whistle and a tug of his leash. As the two of them near a familiar bend toward the halfway point of the walk, she can't help but notice that something seems off about the dog's behavior today. His steps are anxious, and his hackles are up. He keeps sniffing the air, tugging at the leash, whining insistently, as if trying to tell her something. She soothes the dog, promising him that there's nothing over there. The area he keeps staring at, a low growl rumbling in his chest, is an abandoned farm. No one's been over there for years, but no matter what she does, he keeps staring at that abandoned farm in the distance. Suddenly, there's a rustling sound, some sort of unseen animal moving through the bushes toward the farm. The noise sets the dog off, and he jolts in its direction, yanking so hard and so abruptly on the leash that it flies out of his owner's hand. Free to pursue whatever had been aggravating him so much, the dog tears off toward the abandoned farm. The woman chases after him, desperate to catch her beloved pet before he gets himself attacked by a wild animal, or worse. She sprints after the dog for half a mile until they've passed the ruins of an old barn and reached a horse paddock that seems to be in surprisingly good condition. As the woman catches her breath, she spots a sign she'd never noticed before on the road. It reads, "The Miracle Farm." The paint is unchipped, vivid, even fresh. This doesn't look abandoned. Her dog barks sharply, and she follows the sound. There he is, crouched low to the ground, shaking and barking at a pair of horses. Wait. No, those aren't horses. They have the hooves, the haunches, the tails, but their upper bodies are all human torso, arms, head, and face. It shouldn't be possible. but her dog is barking at what appears to be a pair of centaurs. She grabs hold of his leash, urging him back from the strange beasts. As she backs away, she hears a sound behind her, like a person imitating the crow of a rooster. She spins around and sees a wide-eyed man with a bright red wattle on his face, feathers jutting out of his neck. He crows again, then stoops to peck at the ground. Just behind the rooster man, she sees even more impossible human-animal hybrids. Rotund, pink-fleshed children with pig noses roll in a puddle of mud. A woman coiled up on a rock stares straight ahead, forked tongue flitting in and out of her mouth as she hisses. This place isn't abandoned after all. There is still a farm here, but it's no ordinary farm. The woman scoops her dog, her completely ordinary non-human dog, into her arms and sprints back toward the dirt road. She keeps going, running all the way home until she can get to a phone, and immediately calls the authorities. The first few people she speaks to laugh at her, accusing her of making a prank call, but one man takes her seriously and records her report. Then he passes it on to his friends at the SCP Foundation. They conduct a raid of the Miracle Farm and find that it is just as bizarre as the woman described. They uncover files in their office detailing that the property once belonged to Marshall, Carter, and Dark Limited, before its ownership passed to a private company that specializes in the finest in custom-ordered pets, prey, and companions. Mobile Task Force Theta 2, Moreau's morgue, is deployed to the scene, where they bring all on-hand personnel, clients, and living specimens into custody. Personnel and clients are questioned, then given Class A amnestics and released. The specimens are contained for further study, and the facility is destroyed. But not before the MTF discovers a curious marble statue, acting as a fountainhead, providing all drinking water for the animal-human hybrids on site. The statue, depicting the Roman goddess Venus, allows water to flow out of its mouth when pumped in through the base. Somehow, water flowing through it is causing ordinary animals to transform into these bizarre creations. But how? Before we tell you, first, I have a question directly for you. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, and this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/DrBob. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/DrBob. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. And now back to the strange marble statue. The fountain is quickly removed from the area and brought to the Foundation for further study. And that is the story of how the SCP Foundation got its hands on SCP-1575. As is frequently the case at the SCP Foundation, the research team quickly began conducting controlled experiments using SCP-1575. They exposed a variety of animal test subjects to water that had passed through the fountainhead. I combed through the test logs I was able to access and have compiled some of the most relevant examples of the anomaly's effects on various subjects. I must warn you that some of the imagery contained within may be a bit disturbing, even by SCP Foundation standards. I admit that a few of them turned my significantly desensitized stomach, but still, they fascinate me, and like a train wreck in slow motion, I haven't been able to look away. Test 1575-2 was performed on a female Japanese field mouse, Apodemus argenteus, at the adolescent stage of development. After several weeks of exposure to SCP-1575-1, the mouse began to rapidly increase in size. Over the course of 12 days, the mouse grew to a height of 1.01 meters, a 500% increase in overall body size. As the mouse began to grow, her fur falling out and being replaced with smooth, human skin, her face warping into that of a young human woman, her appetite increased drastically. She was provided a standard field mouse diet of fruits, berries, and nuts, and consumed nearly 95% of her body weight at a given time in this provided food. By the 12th day of her mutation, the mouse's heart was unable to support her rapidly growing body, and it gave out. She died due to failure of her cardiovascular system, leaving behind an eerie half-mouse, half-human creature with a vestigial tail, partially transformed paws, and gray-tinged skin where her fur had once been. Test 1575-4's subject was a pre-adolescent male white-tailed deer, Otocoileus virginianus. The deer began to mutate fairly quickly following exposure to the water, and its initial steps were an alarming sight, to say the least. He began to suffer severe hemorrhaging in the pelvic area as his reproductive organs atrophied. By the end of the mutation cycle, they had disappeared entirely, leaving a smooth, fleshy surface behind. Several male researchers in attendance had to leave the room during the initial bleeding, and one asked to be referred to an on-site counselor regarding a persistent, recurring nightmare inspired by the mutation. The deer's arms and legs changed into human arms and legs, hooves into hands and feet. By the end of the process, which stabilized after 30 days, the deer had become an androgynous-looking Eastern Seaboard Native American person. The only remaining indicators that this had once been something other than human were a tail and antler nubs resembling those characteristic of yearling bucks. After testing the anomaly on prey animals, the researchers decided to explore its effects on a predator. The subject of test 1575-6 was an adult female Bengal tiger, Panthera tigris tigris. Naturally, there were concerns about the safety of researchers given the subject's aggressive nature. To prevent any accidental injury or death, she was kept sedated for the duration of any hands-on examination. Unfortunately, the application of these sedatives had a negative impact on the tiger's health during the mutation process. After 4 days, before any dramatic visible transformation had even taken place, the tiger experienced failure of the heart, liver, and kidneys. Though this experiment was largely regarded as a failure, it provided the team with a vital piece of information. Sedatives should not be used on test subjects until they were further along in their transformation and at least 80% stabilized. After the tiger, the research team pivoted to the least threatening version of a similar animal, an adolescent female domestic cat, Felis catus. The transformation occurred without incident over the course of 30 days. It was described as unsettling to watch, especially coupled with the pained yowls of the subject, which slowly transformed into the screams of a young woman. But the subject survived the process. Her body stretched and contorted, claws turned to long, pointed fingernails, whiskers fell out, and fur was completely shed. By the time her transformation was complete, there was a young woman in the containment chamber, crawling around on all fours and batting at particles of dust. She retained her tail, the aforementioned pointed nails, and eyes with the same vertical slit pupils she had as a feline. She spoke several times, but only to request additional food. After testing on a cat, the next natural step was to test the anomaly on a dog. For test 1575-9, the subject was an adult female domestic canine, Canis lupus familiaris, of mixed breed. At this point in time, it was believed that the fountainhead had no anomalous effect on invertebrates. Unfortunately, this experiment proved otherwise. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The dog was exposed to the anomalous water, and dramatic signs of mutation soon began to show. First, the dog began shedding all of its fur. At this point, the researchers got an unfortunate look at something that had been hiding in the dog's coat, an infestation of fleas, which were beginning to transform as well. The fleas had quadrupled in size and were continuing to grow. Even more horrifying, their legs had changed into appendages resembling human fingers, and their features rearranged into a nightmarish facsimile of a human face, blood pouring from their open mouths. Unfortunately for the test subject and any researchers present, the fleas were not the only parasite that had infested this dog. On the 6th day of the experiment, the slowly mutating dog collapsed on her side, breathing heavily, exhibiting intense discomfort. Her abdomen began to distend, and nearby researchers could see something wriggling just beneath the skin. The motion became more violent, and the abdomen distended further and further, as if the dog was progressing through the stages of pregnancy at an advanced rate. One of the researchers made an anxious comment about being reminded of a particular scene from the movie Alien and was admonished for it. But he was quickly proven right, because with a sudden burst, a tapeworm with the face of a man erupted through the skin, screaming at the top of its lungs, eyes rolling wildly in its sockets. One researcher vomited, another fainted. The experiment was swiftly aborted, and testing procedures were updated to include a specification that all subjects must be examined for parasites prior to any exposure to SCP-1575. None of the mutated creatures survived this test. The dog test was a colossal failure on many counts, but it inspired the research team to continue testing on non-mammals, not invertebrates, no one wanted to go down that road again, but other animals at least. For test 1575-12, the subject was a pre-adolescent female hyacinth macaw, Anodorhynchus hyacinthinus. The parrot swiftly began to change, and the sound of agonized caws filled the room, along with a sickening snapping sound. After a moment, the sound was identified as breaking bones. The rest of the bird's body, particularly the muscles and organs, were transforming at a faster pace than the skeleton. The body contorted painfully, and the wings began to split, forming into rudimentary fingers and hands. But the transformation never finished, never stabilized. After 20 days, the macaw was dead, and the cause of death was determined to be internal injuries due to these extensive bone fractures. The subject of test 1575-13 was an adult female leopard gecko, Eublepharis macularius. The transformation occurred at an accelerated rate, and within 1 week, the lizard had grown to a height of approximately 4 feet and displayed many human characteristics, including human legs and feet, a face, and a full head of hair. The hands remained unchanged, though they were larger, and the specimen was still capable of climbing up walls, much like an ordinary gecko. At the 10-day mark, the subject experienced catastrophic organ failure as a result of the mutation and expired. One more test on an invertebrate was conducted, this time deliberately. For test 1575-14, the subject was a female common green grasshopper, Homocestus viridulus. As the mutation began, the grasshopper began to shed its exoskeleton in a process best described as flesh forcing its way out of a casing, breaking the exoskeleton into pieces. What was left following this shedding process was a creature resembling the same grasshopper, but 3 times larger and covered in human skin. It continued to grow, but no further human features seemed to develop. After 15 days, it expired. An autopsy revealed the development of human organs inside, including a heart, lungs, kidneys, and liver. The cause of death could not be determined, but the transformation process is thought to have made the subject incompatible with life. The subject of test 1575-15 was an adult female grizzly bear, Ursus arctos horribilis. During the first 29 days of her mutation, the bear did not consume any food or drink aside from SCP-1575-1. Still, she did not appear to experience any hunger or discomfort aside from the pain of the transformation itself. Her body slowly shrank over the course of 30 days, her fur thinning until it left only the ordinary amount of body hair for an average human woman. Notably, the hair was the same color as the fur she had once had. She retained her bear paws, which appeared to be uncomfortably heavy at the ends of her new human arms. Throughout the transformation, stool samples taken from the subject showed excessive amounts of organic matter, such as blood and fatty deposits. After 32 days, the mutation was complete, and the former bear's condition was stable. She did not speak. Instead, she used her newly transformed mouth and voice to grunt and roar. It was much less intimidating coming out of her human mouth, but researchers noted that her paws and claws were still dangerous and should be avoided. The subject of test 1575-16 was an adolescent female Gravy's zebra, also imperial zebra, Equus grevii. Over the course of 27 days, the zebra's main body, hind legs, and most of her head mutated into a human, resembling the appearance of a person native to Africa. However, her front legs and jaw structure remained that of a zebra. The transformation stabilized, leaving her in this half-changed state. She was unable to move without pain, unable to eat, and exhibited extreme distress at her state of existence. When she attempted to walk, she would lose her balance and topple over, lying on the ground in agony. It is uncertain what caused the transformation to halt at such an incomplete stage, but the subject's quality of life had been all but destroyed. After a thorough physical examination, the half-transformed zebra specimen was euthanized as a humane measure. As disturbing as the results of the Foundation's tests using SCP-1575 were, they allowed for a more thorough understanding of the anomaly and how it operates. The statue, which was studied extensively, shows no anomalous properties on its own, nor do any samples taken of the marble throw up any red flags. It appeared to be a completely ordinary statue, except for the effect that it has on any water that flows through it. This water, or SCP-1575-1, begins to show its anomalous true colors when consumed by a non-human mammal. Non-human mammals who consume 0.5 or more liters of this water per day will begin to mutate over the course of a month. Perplexingly, impossibly, they will mutate into a human being. During the experiments, it was noted that the ethnicity of the resulting human seems to correspond with the humans native to the natural habitat of the pre-transformation mammal. A European deer displays Caucasian features, for example, while a North American deer resembles a Native American. Domestic dogs and cats have ethnically ambiguous features or appear mixed race, likely due to the mixed backgrounds of their species. Many of the survivors of this process develop vocal cords and are able to speak about their experiences, but their odds of surviving are not great. Female specimens have about a 25% fatality rate. Males have a staggering fatality rate of about 95%. There is a 40% chance that the transformed animal, regardless of sex, will keep at least one premutation feature. These include, but are not limited to, paws, tails, ears, and fur. Across the board, those who survive the mutation process describe it as extremely painful. Though these transformed animals can communicate, they tend to display an intelligence level that aligns with their prior species. There are a few exceptions to this, as some subjects have displayed heightened problem-solving skills, but it is uncertain what exactly caused this shift. Proposed causes include neural restructuring during mutation or an unintended byproduct of the Foundation testing itself. These transformed instances do not magically become human in behavior, personality, or habits. They retain their animal instincts, memories, and sense of self, give or take some added depression or anxiety brought on by the traumatic and drastic changes they've endured. Humans exposed to this anomalous water do not seem to change at all, which makes a degree of sense. If the water serves to transform mammals into human beings, then a human drinking it has nothing for the water to change. Still, I wouldn't suggest drinking it. Tap water may not taste great, but it's far less likely to mutate you. SCP-1575 is currently held in a 6 meter by 6 meter by 4 meter containment chamber at Biosite 23, with direct access to Research Laboratory 3 at the same site. Unless it is actively in use for an approved test, no water may be allowed into SCP-1575's containment. After testing has concluded, all water used during the test is to be held in quarantine and may only be used for further tests. At the time of my reading, I discovered one addendum added to the file for SCP-1575 by a doctor assigned to the anomaly. It reads, "Following the incident on the 12th of this month, during test 1575-9, any animal to be used in testing with SCP-1575 is to be thoroughly examined for both external and internal parasites. Our initial beliefs that SCP-1575-1 only affected the primary host has proven wrong. It apparently retains its mutagenic properties, even when ingested secondarily through the host's lower GI tract or bloodstream. We absolutely do not need another instance of half-mutated flea creatures, and the psychologist is having a hard time helping Janet with her nightmares of a 7-foot-long tapeworm with a screaming face tearing out of the belly of a dog. I fear that Janet and I may have those nightmares in common. This imagery will stay with me for quite some time. When it comes to drinking water from mysterious fountains, proceed with caution, my friends. Sure, this particular fountainhead may not trigger mutation in humans, but that doesn't mean it's the only one of its kind out there. Drink from the wrong water spout, and you may find yourself changed, and no one, including me, can predict what you might become."
The car screeches to a halt, the door swings open, and the doctor tumbles out. He lands on his hands and knees in the dirt and throws up the few remaining drops of stomach acid left in his system. He's put his hand in something sticky. He can feel an insect wriggling under his palm. Behind him, the door slams, and a pair of boots walk around to his side of the car.
The translator accompanying him does not offer a hand to help him up. It had been a long car journey with many similar stops. Fortunately, this was the last. The doctor gingerly gets to his feet and takes in his surroundings. He finds himself in a small village hidden amongst thick trees. He's not sure what time it is anymore. The flights, time zones, and car journeys wrought havoc on his circadian rhythms. He knows he is in China, somewhere very remote and very rural. He'd tried to look it up with the maps on his phone during the journey, but he'd lost signal a long time ago. One thing is clear, however. It is the middle of the night. The car's headlights are the only light source in the village. No one comes out to greet them. The doctor brushes himself off and turns to his translator. The man nods towards a small hut near the back of the village, just beyond the headlight's reach. His translator is a man of few words, both ironic and deeply unhelpful. The doctor does not know a word of Mandarin himself. In silence, the two men approach the hut. The doctor reaches out to knock, but his translator has already pushed the door open. Inside, there is just the dim light of a lamp. Almost everything is covered in shadow. It is almost dark enough that they can't see the cobwebs. Almost. Silken strings drape themselves over every surface, wall, and item in the little hut. It's impossible in places to even see what item of furniture is hiding beneath all of the webs. The translator reaches out to touch one of the webs in fascination, but the doctor grabs his hand, shaking his head. He hands the translator a face mask and a pair of disposable gloves. Annoyed, the translator takes them, but does not put them straight on, choosing instead to walk deeper into the hut. After a second, the doctor follows, only he can't help the feeling that something's not right. Something's missing. "Here," says the translator. It is the first word he's said in hours. He's standing behind a little curtain looking down at something, as the doctor joins him there and almost retches from the stench. Lying in the bed is an emaciated man. He looks like he hasn't eaten in days. His wrists and ankles are bound tightly to the bed, so tightly, in fact, that his circulation has been cut off. The doctor can see right away the telltale signs of gangrene spreading across his palms. But they're too late. The man isn't moving. His bony chest isn't rising or falling. Worst of all, he must have been dead for a while now. There are sheets of spiderwebs draped over his sallow skin, like some kind of deathly funeral shroud. The translator mutters something in Mandarin. It doesn't take a PhD to pick up on the evident frustration in his voice. A whole night of driving out to the middle of nowhere for nothing. The translator kicks over a wooden stool. The sound is muffled by the thick layer of cobwebs as he storms out of the hut. But something is wrong here. The doctor can't walk out just yet. Toxicology. That's his field. Poisons, toxins, infections, bites. But that's the thing. There are no bites anywhere on this man's body. Head to toe, under the layer of spider silk, there are no welts, bruises, or puncture marks. The only darkened veins standing out are on his fingertips, as they rot away from stagnant blood. Nothing to do with poisons. But there's something else, too. A hut holding a dead body, full of spiders' webs, but yet, no spiders. A scream fills the hut. The bed rocks violently. The doctor looks down in horror to see the dead man is not as dead as he'd appeared. He thrashes this way and that, straining against the ties on his limbs. The doctor calls out for the translator, who appears at his side almost immediately. The translator shouts something in Mandarin, trying to be heard over the dying man's screams, but it's no use. The man throws his head this way and that, trying to bash his chin into his own chest or hit the top of his skull against the nearest wall. It is no use. The man opens cloudy eyes that stare wildly around the room, searching for something, anything that could help him break free from his restraints. Without thinking, the doctor grabs the man's head and holds it steady. He peers into the man's weeping eyes. Bizarre. If he didn't know better, he'd say they almost looked as if they had spiders' webs built up beneath the eyelids, clouding out the man's windows to see the world. Small, silvery balls of thick liquid gather in the corners of them, too dense, too murky to be tears. From somewhere beneath the haze, the man's pupils find the doctor's. In an instant, his body falls still. It is almost as if he relaxed, completely. A guttural murmur comes from the man's throat. The doctor looks to the translator for help. "Free me." The doctor looks down at his patient. This is the part of medicine he had always hated the most. At what point do you let someone go? At what point do you say it's too late? Is it even right for him to make that decision? Looking at the man lying in front of him, a wave of sadness washes over him. His initial assessment had been right. It is too late. Even if he could treat the gangrene in the man's limbs with amputation, there's still starvation and dehydration to deal with. And then the apparent venom from the spiders. Except, there are no signs of venom. Perhaps it isn't too late after all. With the right treatment, there may be a chance to... The man's wrist snaps, becoming a loose glove of broken bone that's easily pulled from the restraint. A foul stench of exposed, rotten flesh hits the doctor like a slap in the face. He reels back in horror as the man pulls his other decimated hand free too. Unbound by his bed, the man lets out an animalistic roar. Sitting up in the bed, he tips his head back and starts pounding at it with what is left of his hands. Jagged wrist bones, barely housed by paper-thin skin, slam repeatedly into his forehead, harder and harder with each hit. The doctor is frozen to the spot, staring as the man smashes his own head. Skin splits, revealing white bone. Bone cracks. Then, with one last effort that seems to take every remaining morsel of the man's energy, he turns and crunches his fractured skull against the wall, caving the front half of his head in like a deflated basketball. Silence, more terrifying than any sound, fills the hut. The doctor stares at the body. An almost comical image pops into his head. The head looks like just a red plastic bag that someone had left on the floor, full of shards of broken pottery. He almost smiles. But then, the spiders appear. Just one at first, then 10, then a stream, then an eruption, spewing out of the gaps in the man's head like water shooting out of a collapsing dam. The tiny pink spiders flood the room, shooting up the walls into every crack and crevice, writhing and rippling around their feet. That breaks the doctor's paralysis. He and the translator sprint for the door. They crash through it and cover the length of the village in seconds. Grabbing the door handles, they haul themselves up into the 4x4. The translator slams it into reverse and almost crashes into a tree as he turns them around and back onto the dirt trail. They drive all through the night, not talking. The doctor gets control of his breathing, but his heart does not stop hammering the whole time. He cannot shake the images that fill his head. Spiders. Tiny pink spiders. Everywhere. The sun is just rising when the driver suddenly pulls over sharply. His eyes are wide, his face deathly pale. He doesn't say a word as he sits forward, reaches down the back of his shirt, and pulls out one tiny pink spider. The doctor yells in shock and hurriedly grabs a sample pot for the man to throw the spider into. The two men sit there in the front of the car in the warm morning light, staring through the glass at the arachnid. It looks soft. That's the most bizarre thing about it. Rather than having a hard, dark exoskeleton like other spiders, this one looks fleshy. No, that's not quite right. It looks fatty. It looks squishy, like parts of the body that get exposed in traumatic crashes. Wrinkles and folds of pink, mushy cells with fatty deposits. Except it cannot be made from those kinds of things. It's a spider. As they watch, the spider seems to recognize their attention. It stands up on its back 4 legs and raises the remaining ones in the air. It looks almost as if it is doing some kind of mating dance for them. It turns its back to them, revealing a pattern of brightly colored dots across its abdomen. The doctor drags his eyes away from the dance. The sun is gone. Night has fallen again. His stomach stabs at him in hunger. But that can't be right. It was sunrise only a few seconds ago. The headache had started as he sat down on his flight. Now, 5 hours in and somewhere over an ocean, he knows he is not going to sleep tonight. He can't get the image of all those spiders out of his mind. He needs to report this. And he will, definitely. But not yet. A spider crawls up the seat in front of him. His heart stops, and he sits back violently in his seat, eyes wide. On the floor of the plane, pink spiders everywhere. They're not real. They're not real, just his imagination. He needs some rest. That's what he needs. He'll fly home, wait for the headache to pass. Then he can call someone. But right now, he just feels too groggy to do any of that. The adrenaline of his hallucination passes as quickly as it had come. He can feel the glass pot in his pocket tapping occasionally, begging for his attention. His head aches. He runs a hand through his hair. That can't be. Is he really growing gray hairs already? In frustration, he reaches up and taps at his forehead. Much to his surprise, the headache disappears almost instantaneously. If anything, it feels good. He sits there for several minutes, drumming a couple of fingers against his forehead, and before he knows it, he's fast asleep. All his fears and anxieties long behind him. Only they are not behind him. Once he touches down, he goes straight home to his apartment. No spiders to be seen. Why not? Shouldn't there be more spiders? He certainly wants more spiders. His headache comes back. He drinks water, takes some medicine, goes for a nap, and turns off all of the lights. But nothing seems to work. Even the tapping stops working. More spiders. A call lights up his phone screen, an international number. He takes a long time to answer it. It's his translator. The man's voice is shrill, panicked, far beyond what the doctor had ever heard before, even when they'd been running from the spiders. The translator is not making much sense. His words are slurred, and his sentences stop and start seemingly at random. None of it makes sense. The doctor turns the volume on his phone down. It's too loud for his headache, way too loud. Government knows. Should have worn gloves. Too late. The pain. The pleasure. Using a hammer. None of it makes any sense. The doctor looks down at his phone screen. The call is gone. His phone is dead. Hadn't it been on full a moment ago? What time is it? And where are the spiders? He punches himself in the head. A smile spreads across his face. He's in bed now. Something red around him. His pillow. It is soaked red. Could that be from his head? The sample pot sits on his bedside table, only now it's empty. How did that happen? Wasn't he standing in the kitchen a moment ago? He's losing time. He runs a hand through his hair. Webbing clings between his fingers. He sits under his desk with a hammer in his hand, euphoria washing over his body. Just once more. 8 more times. He hits the hammer against his forehead. Endorphins flood every cell of his body, so powerful he almost passes out as the pleasure chemicals crawl inside of him, oozing silk through the pores of his skin. Webs hang all over his apartment now. Just one more hit. 8 more hits. That feeling, it's just so. His wrists, his ankles. How many limbs? 4. Not enough. That light. Where is he? Figures crowd around him. It is hard to see them. Something's in his eye. Everything looks blurry and far away. The pain is back. His head. Someone, please. He screams and pulls against the bindings on his limbs. The pain. It's impossible. He needs to make it stop. Just one hit. Just one more hit from the hammer. That'll be enough. Something is behind his eye. He can feel it. Something crawling on the back of his eyeball. But that doesn't matter. None of it matters, except getting his pain to stop. No more headaches. Just one more hit. That's all he needs. The hospital staff have never seen anything like this before. They're out of their depth here. In the dead of night, they arrange for the doctor to be transferred to a specialist facility in the back of an ambulance. It is a challenge to get him out of his bed, as the spider's webs secreting from his skin have all but tied him to the linen. As fate would have it, a drunk driver gives the doctor his final wish. Not seeing a red light, the driver plows full speed into the side of the ambulance, sending it spinning off the road and down a hill, killing everyone inside, including the doctor. When police arrive at the scene in the early hours of the morning, they find the driver sitting on his own, staring at some small insect by the wreckage. The driver is unharmed by the incident. His only complaint as he spends the following night in police custody is that he feels a mild headache coming on. Anyone experiencing that headache is likely already too far gone from their exposure to SCP-372, an anomalous species of cognitohazardous arachnids nicknamed Intrusive Arachnid Thoughts. Unconfirmed reports of mysterious spider colonies have been springing up across Asia, particularly in rural China, for several decades in connection with this anomaly. In 1972, the population of an unnamed town in the Anhui province were found to have been almost entirely wiped out. An entire town of corpses, each with their heads caved in, brain matter missing. With 106 dead, with 23 injured, this case is to this day the deadliest confirmed SCP-632 breach. Strange as it may be, physiologically speaking, SCP-632 could be considered cute. Their bodies are squishy in texture, bright pink, and are in fact made up of human tissue, brain tissue to be exact, coated in a layer of protective fat. As happened to our unfortunate doctor, SCP-632 reproduces parasitically within the human skull. The exact mechanics of this process remain unclear. It is believed that SCP-632 infects its human host through a selection of sensory triggers. Those infected have each testified to having been exposed to the following. Firstly, viewing the pattern on SCP-632's abdomen exposed during the dance that the spiders often do under observation. Secondly, making physical contact with SCP-632. And lastly, through exposure to as yet unidentified chemical compounds secreted by the older SCP-632 instances. This is where luck was not on our doctor's side. He was smart enough to wear gloves during his encounter with SCP-632 in China, which may have been enough to protect him from being infected. However, upon his arrival as he fell out of the car, his hand landed directly in an SCP-632 web housing a solitary live spider. If he had remembered his car sickness tablets, this could have all been avoided. Within 3 hours of initial exposure to SCP-632, the subject will start to experience mild headaches, followed by an uncanny sensation that their skin is growing silk.
During this period, MRI scans have found that small filament-like structures start to form within the host's brain tissue. As these filaments multiply and spread throughout the brain, the subjects report developing an obsession with spiders. The brain tissue steadily deteriorates, leading to changes in personality and mood, as well as irrational behavior. Over the coming days, the headaches grow more severe as the filament cells press against the blood vessels lining the inside of the skull. Subjects find that they can relieve this sensation by tapping or hitting their forehead, replacing it with a pleasurable feeling as the filaments release endorphins upon impact. This is part of the sinister final act of SCP-632's reproduction. After 6 to 7 days, as the host's headaches worsen, they find they have to hit their skull harder and harder to alleviate the pain and get that chemical high. Eventually, driven mad by the pain inside their head, they crack through their own skull. At this point, all of the gestating spiders that have been forming within the filaments in their brain, estimated to number between 80 and 200, can escape through the opening. Because of its unique containment difficulties caused by its cognitohazardous properties, SCP-632 has been given the Euclid object class. There is currently one live colony of SCP-632 stored in the biological containment wing of Site-52. The colony is housed in a small enclosure measured 20 centimeters by 40 centimeters by 20 centimeters and sustained on a diet of insects and water supplied through a vacuum chute. All personnel that work in proximity to SCP-632 are regularly screened. Physical contact with any SCP-632 is strictly prohibited, and all personnel are required to wear protective equipment and respirators at all times while handling live or deceased specimens. They keep a close eye on anyone developing any symptoms, especially headaches, the feeling of silk on the skin, or intrusive arachnid thoughts.
It's never a nice feeling waking up lying amongst shards of broken glass in the middle of the road. The dawn sky above the biker looks almost peaceful. It's as if nothing had gone wrong at all, as if everything is right in the world. But slowly, the throbbing pain washes into his helmeted head, and the sound of the traffic surrounding him rises in his ears. A sea of onlookers gathers around as the cars blast their horns. Through the cracked visor of his helmet, the biker can see concerned faces, people calling emergency services, and a few women crying. His paramedic bike is toppled on its side about 40 feet from him. There are long black tire marks running up to where it lies, smoking slightly on its side. With a groan, the biker sits himself up and shakes his head. Bad idea. Looking around, though, it seems he's the only one injured. His bike had gone into the front of a car at the junction. The occupants of the car stand by nervously, offering him whatever little assistance they can. But there's no time for that, the biker suddenly realizes. He looks down at his watch frantically. It's 12:03 p.m. There's not enough time. He rushes over to the bike as fast as he can and lifts it back upright. A couple of onlookers try to grab his arms, trying to sit down to rest, but he can't. There's no time. He has just 3 minutes to get to St. Mary's Hospital in central London. Right now, he's at the junction outside Baker Street Station. He can still make it on time if he gets on his bike and goes now. The biker swings his leg onto the bike and kicks it into life. He takes a deep gulp and looks over his shoulder at the box on the back of his bike. He can't risk opening it here. The damage may already be done. But if the heart is still alive in that box, it is the only chance that a 10-year-old boy has for a normal life. If he doesn't get to the hospital in the next 3 minutes, his life could be over. The school children stand in a circle, looking down at the dead bird with a morbid fascination.
Do you think it's alive? No way.
The boy in the middle of the group goes to pick up a stick. With an air of false confidence, he walks up to the bird and gives it a prod. It makes a squelching noise. The other kids all reel in shock, making retching noises and laughing about it. It's only when their teacher comes out to call them inside that the group disperses, leaving the animal carcass alone, sitting at the edge of the playground, outside the view of boring adults. Each passing day, the kids wander over to the bird's body. It's kind of the best biology lesson they've ever had as they watch the animal slowly decompose. At first, its body just shrinks, goes flat almost. The feathers start falling out, and it loses all of its color. Then it starts to get puffy. Different parts of its flesh bulge out in weird places, as if they're being inflated like a balloon animal at someone's birthday party. But then, the maggots come. There are only a couple of tiny white crawling wrigglers in the bird's body at first, but a couple of days after that, it's infested with them. The creepy crawlies wriggle all over the body. But as the boy looks down at the dead bird, he spots something very peculiar, something they haven't seen in a biology class before. There's a red maggot, wriggling and crawling in amongst the rest of the creepy crawlies. It squirms like the rest of them, but even over the course of the school day, it quickly grows larger than any of the others.
What do you think it is?
The boy stares at it.
It looks like a worm.
And a worm is exactly what it was. The next day, when the kids return, they see that the red maggot is now much larger than any of the others feasting on the bird. With a slightly translucent body, cherry red coloring, and small white speckles on its skin, it looks unlike anything they've ever seen before. Actually, not unlike anything they've ever seen before. It looks exactly like something that all the kids recognize very well. In fact, one of the kids has a bag of them right now that he's chewing on. A candied worm. The kids stare in curiosity, first at the bag of candy that their friend has in his hand, and then down at the worm, slowly eating its way through the decomposing bird. As far as their eyes can tell, the two things are exactly the same. Except, of course, that the one eating the bird seems to be alive. Kids being kids, the next thing that happened was sort of inevitable. One dares the boy to eat it. He almost retches in disgust. There's no way he's even touching it. And then, another one of the children throws down the poison chalice and dares him. The boy stands there nervously. He knows that he's not allowed to eat worms. That had been a lesson ingrained in him from a very young age. But his mother isn't here right now, and this thing doesn't look like any kind of worm that he's seen before. It almost looks a bit tasty. In exchange for eating the worm, another one of the children promises he'll give him 5 English pounds. The kids around the circle gasp. That's a lot of money. None of them have even got 2 pounds on them, let alone 5. Think of all the sweets you could buy with that kind of money. But the boy is adamant. He puffs his chest out, he stands up tall, and he nods firmly. 5 pounds, or he wouldn't do it. After some intense schoolyard debate, the deal is sealed. As the boy lies in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and grumbling, he knows that he is not happy about what his friends have done to him today. He's going to get them back for this. Only he's getting a bit of a tummy ache. Getting is the wrong word. He's had a tummy ache for most of the evening. What he's experiencing now is heartburn. It feels as if something is crawling in his chest. The boy just ignores it. It's probably just his worries about the worm inside of him. He chewed it up pretty well. There's no way that it's still alive in him, surely. His uneasy sleep is punctuated by rotten dreams. Dreams in which he finds himself lying on the floor and his playground lying on the ground at school, unable to move as people gather around him to poke him with a stick. He feels his skin covered with maggots. They even crawl across the surface of his eyes. In his chest, there's a searing pain. The boy wakes with a start as he feels his heart pounding, thudding against his ribs. It's agonizing. Adrenaline courses through him as he sweats off his face. Crying out for his mom, the boy lies there in bed, feeling the heart attacking his system. When you decide to become a surgeon, you have to accept that you're not going to get very much sleep most nights. In fact, it's more than that. You have to not only accept that you won't get much sleep most nights, but you also have to be at your absolute best when you've had no sleep and it's the middle of the night. With over 40 years under his belt, the surgeon doesn't need coffee anymore, even when the junior doctor offers it to him as he strides toward the operating theater. Instead, he asks them to fill him in on the situation. Who's his patient? What's going on? What needs to be done? The doctor accompanying him reads the notes in a calm but hurried voice. They haven't got much time on this one at all. At any moment, the boy's heart could give out. The surgeon asks what's wrong with the organ, and the doctor looks at his notes in apparent confusion. Apparently, over the course of the night, the boy has suffered a 72% reduction in the mass of his heart. The surgeon stops just on the other side of the door. He doesn't want to have this conversation in front of his whole team. He whispers to the doctor in a terse voice,
What kind of infection does this boy have that his heart has undergone that rapid of a deterioration? It's not an infection at all, sir. Well, sir, it's a worm.
The doctor holds out a sheet to him. The surgeon takes it from him. He looks down at the x-ray to see a scan of the boy's chest cavity. It doesn't look so bad. There's a hole in the heart for sure, but the surgeon has encountered worse in his career.
This was taken when the boy was first admitted.
The doctor hands the surgeon a second x-ray.
And this was taken just 1 hour later.
It is barely recognizable as a human heart. There seems to be a mass growing in the cavity that was left by the heart, and there, infecting all of the boy's organs, was the shape of a worm. The biker weaves his way through the traffic down on Marylebone Road, eyes darting frantically in all directions. He may have a concussion, and he may not be allowed to drive at all right now. In fact, he knows he definitely isn't. But he is under strict instructions. This heart needs to get to St. Mary's Hospital before it's too late. The bike careens around the corner and skids to a halt outside the emergency doors. An ambulance team in front of him is trying to help an old lady out of the back of their vehicle, but the biker doesn't have time for them. He grabs the organ box from the back of the bike and races into the building. It takes all of his remaining concentration to navigate through the maze of hospital corridors on his way to the operating theater. On a better day, he'd be able to do this with no problem, but with his head injury, he can see the lights starting to blur all around him. Ward 6, Ward 7, Ward 7A, Ward 7B. He runs as fast as his heavy boots will allow him, feeling that energy draining from his system. He can't look at his watch, he can't check the time, he just has to find this boy. Operating theater, there, right up ahead of him, just a couple of 100 feet. There's a doctor waiting outside the door who looks up at the sound of his footsteps. The biker rips his helmet off and holds out the box with the heart in it, panting heavily. It's the moment of truth. Is he too late? The doctor looks shell-shocked, not at the biker's arrival, but clearly at something else she's just seen. The man starts to explain, but runs out of words, and instead beckons the biker to follow him into the observation room. There, the two of them stand looking through the glass at the little boy lying on the operating table with the surgeon standing over him. There's something in the air. The biker sniffs, confused. Can anyone else smell sugar? Next time you open a packet of candied worms, take a second to look through the little creepy crawlies in the bag. Perhaps poke a couple of them, just to see if any of them are moving. You can never be too careful. If you had told the parents of that young boy on the night when their son woke up with heart palpitations, telling stories of eating a worm at school, that the only health concerns he would have going forward were mild diabetes and a slightly raised level of blood sugar, I'm sure they would have been thrilled to hear it. You see, SCP-839, commonly referred to within the Foundation as candied worms, is much scarier on the surface than it is underneath. Not only does this SCP resemble your usual candy worm, but its body is actually composed of sugar flavorings and colorings, roughly equivalent to what you would find in most convenience store candy aisles. Each instance even has a small raised bit of writing near the tail specifying which flavor it is. While the origins of these worms are yet to be determined, cases have sprung up across much of the Western world, with higher numbers reported in areas with higher levels of diabetes. There seems to be a parallel between high-sugar diets and the presence of SCP-839. Whether they are of man-made or other origins is yet to be determined. That is not to say that SCP-839 cannot survive outside of human populations. This SCP in the wild primarily feeds on decomposing organic matter and is capable of sustaining itself on a purely vegetarian diet. However, when ingested into the human body, SCP-839 will target specific organs and burrow its way towards them. The organ in question depends on which color candied worm the SCP instance is. For example, the red cherry-flavored candied worms will burrow towards the heart and consume that, while the blue raspberry ones will instead feed on the human's kidney. One would expect the health consequences of this feeding to be severe. However, as the SCP feeds, it will also change its own shape and chemical composition until the worm itself becomes a substitute organ for the one that it is consuming. However, this substitute organ is not a perfect replacement, as other health consequences are derived from its presence. For example, the green apple-flavored SCP-839-3 targets the eye and replaces it with a jelly-green version of the human eye. While this eye is mostly capable of sight, subjects have reported mild hallucinations and blurriness of vision, as well as a greenish tint to how they see the world. Fortunately for the Foundation, SCP-839 reproduces sexually, meaning that individual instances require a partner in order to have offspring. This has made containment of this SCP much more feasible. Though they are a relatively low-priority entity in the broader scope of the Foundation, there are no known cases as of yet of any SCP-839 infections leading to death or serious chronic illness. Therefore, any instances that are captured by the Foundation are sent to Storage Site 839-1, where they are kept in a glass housing and regularly fed a diet of plant matter each day. Here, their reproductive activity can be closely monitored and controlled based on what research is needed. Those infected with SCP-839 instances can continue to live long and healthy lives, with only minor health complications arising. Therefore, the Foundation is comfortable allowing a reasonable number of cases to go unexamined in the world. So, like I said, for next time you open up a bag of candied worms, maybe just give them a quick poke. You could be saving yourself a trip to the hospital and a lifetime dependence on insulin.
A young man tosses and turns in bed. He adjusts his pillow and tries sleeping on his back, his side, his stomach, but nothing works. He rolls over to check the time. 3 a.m. This is the third night in a row he hasn't been able to fall asleep. He feels tired. He wants to sleep. But every time he closes his eyes and sleep starts to creep in, something happens. And suddenly, he's wide awake again. It's as if someone keeps flipping a switch in his brain to awake, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. It's affecting everything in his life. He can't concentrate in class, his work performance goes down the drain. Even his hobbies become completely unenjoyable. All he wants to do is sleep. His friends and family can tell something is wrong. It's as if he has become a different person, and they urge him to go see a doctor. But the doctors tell him there's nothing they can do for him. He's perfectly healthy otherwise. He should try some natural remedies like valerian root and get more exercise. He has no idea how many days he's been awake now. 4, 5, maybe more. At this point, the lack of sleep isn't even the worst part. It's the hallucinations. Sometimes they're just a shadow dancing outside of his vision, but others are incredibly vivid, feeling more real than his now dreary life does. He had to stop going to work and class entirely since he can't concentrate for more than a couple of seconds at a time. His friends don't want anything to do with him, and who can blame them? He has uncontrollable mood swings and lashes out for no reason. He's tried every sleep remedy there is. He took the doctor's advice and exercised as hard as he ever has. But with never being able to sleep, he has no energy left. He's becoming a living zombie. He gets up out of bed but loses his balance and collapses to the floor. He tries to get up, but he can't. He'll just lie there for a while. He starts to drift away, and he readies himself for the jolt that always wakes him back up. But this time, it doesn't come. The wave of sleep that starts to wash over him feels different this time, though. It's heavier, more peaceful, and more permanent. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-966, also known as Sleep Killer. SCP-966 is the designation that the SCP Foundation has given to a creature that belongs to a group of anomalous predatory beasts, standing 1.4 to 1.6 meters tall and weighing roughly 30 kilograms. These hairless humanoids have an elongated face, a mouth full of pointed needle-like teeth, and each of their hands has 5 razor-sharp claws that can be up to 20 centimeters in length. Though unlike humans and apes, they are digitigrade, meaning that they walk using only their toes. But you won't be able to see the horrible visage of SCP-966 under normal circumstances, as they are only visible under very specific lighting conditions. They can only be viewed under light that has a wavelength between roughly 700 and 900 nanometers, which is just at the edge of the light spectrum that's visible to humans, stretching into what's known as infrared light. The only exception to this is if their skin, muscles, or organs have suffered from 2nd or 3rd degree burns, in which case, the affected areas of their body will show up under a greater spectrum of wavelengths that are visible to the human eye. Though frightening to look at, SCP-966 are actually quite weak physically, with very low muscular density. Their bones are hollow, similar to birds, and while their claws may be incredibly sharp, they are also easily broken, making them unsuited for use in combat. Additionally, they do not rest through sleep, but will, at seemingly random times, stop all movement and fall into a rest period that lasts roughly 3 to 5 minutes, after which they are able to resume their normal behavior. With all of these physical shortcomings, how did SCP-966 gain a reputation as such a fearsome hunter? The secret lies in their ability to emit bursts of a previously unknown type of wave. Hunting either alone or in pairs, SCP-966 uses this wave to inhibit its prey's ability to enter any of the restful sleep stages, and also stops the ability to microsleep. These waves have been observed to be effective at up to 20 meters,
though tests have shown that they can be blocked by post-transition metals, of which lead appears to be especially effective. SCP-966 hunts and feeds on medium to large-sized animals, which includes humans. And once their quarry has been targeted by the sleep-inhibiting waves, the effect is permanent, with no method having yet been discovered that will allow them to regain the ability to sleep. Experiments have shown that unconsciousness can be induced in other ways, such as with the use of general anesthesia, though these methods have ultimately proven to be ineffective, since although the victim is unconscious, they are still not receiving any of the restful benefits of sleep while in that state. The effects of sleep deprivation on humans, both mentally and physically, are devastating. Symptoms can begin setting in after just 24 hours that can include mood swings, memory issues, and sensory impairment. After 2 to 3 days, the body's hormones become deregulated, and bodily functions like hunger, thirst, and temperature fluctuate wildly as cognitive abilities start to dramatically decline. Hallucinations, paranoia, and fits of rage are common, and the risk of death from sleep deprivation increases with each day that passes without sleep. And this is exactly what SCP-966 wants. After surreptitiously sending a burst of sleep deprivation waves at their victim, they will then stalk their prey until lack of sleep finally leads to total incapacitation, at which point SCP-966 consumes them. SCP-966 have proven to be both extremely quiet and agile when hunting. However, they have actually been observed intentionally making threatening noises around their prey, presumably to further increase their already elevated stress levels, and potentially hastening their mental degradation. On rare occasions, they will even physically assault their victim to further degenerate their mental and physical health. Some of SCP-966's prey will experience especially intense hallucinations and bouts of rage, which is theorized to be caused by prolonged exposure to multiple instances of their sleep-stopping waves. Why some victims are exposed to multiple waves when a single instance has been shown to be 100% effective is unknown, and it's hypothesized that they may only engage in this behavior when especially hungry to try and speed up the process, though others have put forth the theory that SCP-966 may take some perverse form of joy in seeing its victims suffer prior to expiring. Wild instances of SCP-966 have been found across the globe, and while the SCP Foundation has been successful in thinning their numbers, they still exist in high enough numbers to pose a serious threat to humanity. For these reasons, they have been assigned the classification Euclid. Mobile Task Forces Iota-1 and Iota-2, codenamed the Dream Hunters and Air Chasers respectively, are continually monitoring for any reports of sudden or violent deaths related to sleep deprivation in order to identify and neutralize the remaining instances of wild SCP-966. 4 SCP-966 specimens, 3 males and 1 female, have been acquired by the Foundation, and they are currently contained in a 10 by 10 meter room that is lined with lead and equipped with infrared security cameras. Each specimen is fed 20 kilograms of meat each month, and in the event that the female specimen gives birth, the new specimen is to be taken for observation and study before being disposed of prior to reaching maturity. A storm rages outside of the little old house as inside, a little old woman bounces a little baby on her little old knee. The baby coos and laughs as the old woman makes funny faces and noises for the child, trying to keep it entertained as they wait for his parents to return from their much-needed night out by themselves. The old woman herself needs a rest now, though. She's forgotten how exhausting it can be to watch a child. "Okay, that's enough. It's time for both of us to take a little nap before your parents get back." She gets up and takes the baby into a nearby room that looks as though it was a nursery at one time, but it hasn't been used for many years. As she goes to set the child into the crib, a strong gust of wind blows through the room. She places the baby down and rushes to the window and closes it shut. It must have been left cracked open by mistake. Brr, the room is cold from the wind, but she has just the thing to fix that. She moves to a small closet and opens the creaky door. The little old woman strains to reach up to the top shelf and feels around. Ah, there it is. She pulls down a baby blanket, a soft baby blue with colorful animals printed on it. It looks as though it's been up there for a long time, and she gives it a good shake before walking back to the crib. "Look what we have here. It's your daddy's own blankie." She gives it another shake. "There we go, good as new." She leans into the crib and wraps the small helpless child in the blanket before giving him a gentle kiss on the forehead. "Now you get some sleep." Your mommy and daddy will be back before you know it, and we want to show them what a good babysitter Grammy is, don't we? That way I get to see you all the time." The little old woman switches off the light and exits the room, leaving the door cracked just a few inches. She heads back to the couch and plops down on it. Almost as soon as she does, though, the baby starts crying. With a sigh, she gets back up and goes back to the nursery. "What's the matter, little dear?" she says as she turns the lights on. "Oh no," she rushes to the crib. "You've kicked your blanket off. You must be freezing." She grabs the blanket from the end of the crib and tucks it around the baby once again. "There you go, that's better." The old woman leaves the room and quietly closes the door shut, leaving it open just a few inches. The moment she turns around to go back to the couch, though, the crying starts again. With a sigh, she opens the door and goes back into the room. Once again, the blanket is stuffed at the end of the crib where the baby has kicked it off. "Fine, don't want a blanket, that's fine." She picks the baby up out of the crib and rocks him in her arms until it stops crying. She sets him back in the crib. "There you go. No blankets, just please get some sleep. Grammy's tired." The old woman takes the blanket out of the crib and leaves the room. She closes the door most of the way and, incredibly, this time the child remains silent. The old woman resumes her place on the couch and starts to yawn. Just as she does, the wind outside picks up and howls loudly. The old woman shivers. She looks next to her and spots the baby blanket. She picks it up and examines the cute animal print, remembering when her own son was a baby wrapped in it. She smiles at the happy thought and throws the blanket around her shoulders. She leans back on the couch and finds that her eyes are growing very heavy. She'll rest them for just a moment. She won't fall asleep. She'll just rest. "Mom, it's us. We're back. Thanks again for..." The couple both scream when they enter the house to find that the old woman is lying face down on the floor in a pool of blood. The source of the blood is obvious. Chunks of flesh from her shoulders and upper back have been torn out, leaving jagged holes, as if she were mauled by an animal. As the man runs to the old woman, trying to do anything he can to help her, the woman runs to the nursery to find that the baby is sleeping peacefully in his crib. The woman picks up the child, tears streaming down her cheeks, and returns to the living room to see her husband kneeling beside his dead mother. Both the husband and wife are so shocked by what they have found that neither notices the baby blanket lying on the couch, or that the cruel, blood-covered mouth on it is slowly fading from view until it disappears completely. There is little in life that is more comforting than a favorite blanket. Perhaps you've had the same one since you were a child, or you have a heavy one that you like to wrap yourself in when you're feeling down, or maybe it's just one that's especially fluffy and warm that you'd do anything to keep. Today's anomaly plays on those very feelings, using them against its victims to become one of the more insidious predatory anomalies in the SCP Foundation archives. This is SCP-799, also known as the Carnivorous Blanket. SCP-799 is a type of creature that can vary in shape, size, and appearance, but, as the name implies, always takes the form of a blanket of some kind. The exact material the anomaly is made out of is unknown, but it is a very soft fiber that in many ways resembles a high-quality merino wool blend, though one that retains heat even more effectively than its natural counterpart. SCP-799's weight can vary from between half a kilogram all the way to 6 kilograms, and while examples have been found in nearly every color imaginable, it seems predisposed towards pastels and will frequently have patterns featuring stylized, friendly depictions of various animals. Both the pastel colors and the childish patterns are especially common in instances of SCP-799 that weigh less than 2 kilograms and would colloquially be known as baby blankets. While SCP-799 is undoubtedly a living organism, there is some debate as to whether it is itself an animal or perhaps a type of fungal colony. Instances of 799 are incapable of locomotion, lying motionless for long periods of time, and require little in the way of nutrition. What small amount they do need, they appear to be able to gain almost entirely from the organic particles present in normal household dust, such as animal dander and dead human skin cells. The blanket feeds via a series of minute, filter-feeding mouth-like structures that are spread across the surface of the creature, which wait for nutrients to fall into them, not unlike a sponge on the ocean floor. Instances of SCP-799 can survive for quite a while in this state, and one specimen was noted as having lived for multiple years in a damp attic, subsisting entirely on the small organic particles that would drift down from the rafters above. Should an instance of SCP-799 be forced to go for long periods of time without a source of nutrition, though, like when, for example, it is placed inside of a sealed closet or drawer, it will begin to undergo certain physical changes, which result in it metamorphosing into its predatory form. These changes aren't noticeable from only casual observation and consist of the blanket converting its many filter-feeding mouths into a single, large one that is lined with multiple rows of extremely sharp teeth. The blanket creature also develops a new form of tissue inside its cloth-like structure, one that is similar to muscle and capable of contracting and squeezing. Once its metamorphosis is complete, the instance of SCP-799 will lie in wait for an unsuspecting creature to cover themselves with it or wrap it around their body. Once they do, the blanket will bide its time until they enter a state of rest, usually waiting for them to fall asleep entirely, at which point its feeding phase will begin. Once the creature has detected that its victim is dormant, it will use its newly formed muscle to latch onto them, holding them in place as it opens its tooth-lined maw. It will begin to bite at its confined prey, tearing off several kilograms of flesh, bone, and any other organic material it can, swallowing it, and converting it into a thin slurry that it spreads through its body almost immediately. This traumatic, violent process nearly always leads to the victim dying of blood loss. Within 10 minutes of the attack, the mouth on SCP-799 will have been completely reabsorbed, leaving no signs that it is anything other than a normal, everyday blanket, though one which now mysteriously weighs several kilograms more than it did before. By 40 minutes after the attack, the entire digestive system within SCP-799 will have demetamorphosed back into its original form, with a single digestive tract being changed once again to the many dispersed filter-feeding mouths. While SCP-799 is more than happy to feed on any warm-blooded animal, including humans, it shows no interest in cold-blooded ones or inanimate objects. It appears then that its senses may be limited to only touch and heat, using those as signs that it is now wrapped around a potential meal. Adding to the strangeness of SCP-799 is that it reproduces through budding, like flatworms and corals. When it has absorbed enough nutrients and sufficiently increased its mass, either very slowly through filter feeding or rapidly via its carnivorous phase, it will begin to take on a quilt-like appearance. Over several weeks, one of the quilt squares will puff up and slide off the blanket. This new, smaller instance will resemble a doily or a throw pillow, until it too begins to feed and grow. The new instance is a perfect clone of its parent, identical in every way, and it will eventually grow to a similar size and begin its own reproductive cycle. It is unknown exactly how long it takes SCP-799 to reach full maturity, but the current best guess is that when kept in its filter-feeding phase, an instance will reproduce every 50 to 60 years. Instances of SCP-799 are quite prevalent across the planet, and the SCP Foundation currently has hundreds of examples in containment. Unfortunately, it is unknown just how many still exist in the wild, as it is very difficult to identify instances, with one of the only reliable means being through genetic testing. Should any instances be located, though, they are to be destroyed immediately, as the Foundation already has a large enough population in containment for research purposes, and they pose too much of a risk both in terms of harm and exposure to the general public. SCP-799 has been classified as Euclid, and each instance is kept in its own separate biocontainment cell at Biosite 66. Dust is regularly collected from the on-site D-Class personnel dorms and is sprinkled over the blankets regularly to keep them in their filter-feeding state, though only just enough to hopefully maintain their size and not allow them to reproduce. Should any small cloth objects appear in their containment lockers, it is to be removed immediately and contained separately. SCP-799 isn't the only predatory creature that resembles a cloth good in Foundation containment, and research into possible connections to SCP-1626, the oversized gray-hooded sweatshirt that sends penetrating fibers into anyone unlucky enough to put it on, is ongoing. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-1051, Nevadan Extraterrestrial, for another anomaly with a rather unique feeding strategy. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single anomaly as we delve further and further into the SCP Foundation's classified archives.